the moment the most terrifying legend of the Eastern continent appeared again. Every beast on the battlefield was crushed under her terrifying soul power pressure, frozen in place. Zhang Liui, who had not lifted her child state in ages, was now riding atop the water-avoiding golden-eyed beast while commanding the Star Soul General, Bull Demon King, calmly adjusting to the shift in her power. Once she fully found that familiar feeling again, she decided to settle every last bit of old hatred and fresh revenge with the unlucky god-rank beast right in front of her. She knew this was not the same god-rank beast that had disturbed her sleep back at the sacred sect, but it had burned clothes she actually liked, and that alone was more than enough reason for her to make it pay. At Zhang Liui's command, the water-avoiding golden-eyed beast launched its attack. In the next instant, a soul power beam no weaker than the enemy's own blasted straight toward that god-rank beast, and that seemingly simple strike smashed the Kun-type beast until blood burst from its head, even forcing its massive body to drift out from the rift. Even then, Zhang Liuyi still was not satisfied in the slightest, leaving the monster no room at all to recover or regroup. She stepped onto the void and rose into the air, while the Hung-Sing spiked club in her hand had already gathered overwhelming force. The next second, that attack carrying the weight of 1,000 tons exploded right on top of the god-rank beast's head. That blow did not just shave off several meters of flesh from the Kun-type beast's skull, it also dragged every low-rank beast near the god-rank battlefield into the disaster. And the one who had caused all this chaos in the first place was also blasted away by the soul power shockwave stirred up by his own ancestor's strike. But after witnessing that scene, Song Yongzhang no longer felt any of the fear he had just moments ago. What replaced it was a surge of excitement unlike anything before, stirred up by his ancestor's absurdly brutal power. That plain, straightforward, world-shaking blow was the clearest possible definition of breaking all techniques with sheer force. However, just as Zhang Liuyi was about to continue taking revenge on the Kun-type beast, two Dijang-type beasts circling near the battlefield suddenly moved as if they had received an order from a superior, throwing themselves at the Star Soul General, Bull Demon King, without hesitation. Seeing those two annoying flies, Zhang Liuyi merely raised the Hung-Sing spiked club and lazily aimed it at them. Right after that, a soul power beam that looked as though its power had been compressed countless times over shot out and instantly shredded one of the Saint-rank Dijang-type beasts, core and all, into pieces. But that tiny bit of time she wasted in the middle of it unexpectedly gave the Kun-type beast a chance to call for reinforcements and steady itself. With a heaven-shaking roar from the creature, a huge swarm of Baifeng-type beasts parasitizing its body poured out all at once. In the blink of an eye, they gathered into a horrifying black vortex right in front of Zhang Liuyi, and the Dijang-type beast that had narrowly escaped being cleaned up also seized that opening and launched a sneak attack, but it had badly underestimated the strength of Bull Demon King's mount. The water-avoiding golden-eyed beast, which also possessed god-rank construct-level toughness, clamped down on its vital point with ridiculous ease. To it, a mere Saint-rank Dijang-type beast was as fragile as paper. With just a little force, it could crush the thing to pieces. Even so, that sneak attack from the Dijang-type beast was not completely useless. The black vortex formed by the swarm of Baifeng-type beasts used that opening to completely surround the Star Soul General, Bull Demon King, along with his mount. But when General Tanluo saw that scene from afar, he was not nervous in the slightest. He knew full well that against this level of encirclement, the old ancestor could wipe them all out with nothing more than a casual breath, and the result unfolded exactly the way he said it would. A streak of golden light suddenly erupted from the center of the vortex. In the next instant, countless Bifeng-type beasts were blown apart into chunks of flesh and a rain of blood that came crashing down from the sky. And Bull Demon King, drenched in beast blood, looked like a true demon god, terrifying and majestic beyond words. What Zhang Liuyi had not expected, however, was that the beasts had paid such a horrifying price in casualties just to stall her for that tiny sliver of time. That way, the Kun-type beast could seize the opening, launch a sneak attack, swallow her whole, and drag her away from the area. Even General Tanluo was left stunned by that outcome. But before he could even process what had happened, the Kun-type beast had already taken his old ancestor with it and escaped the battlefield through a spatial rift it had prepared in advance. As for the giant tear temporarily opened by the god-rank beast, it healed shut and vanished after they left. It even caused the rift opened by the rift generator to shrink quite a bit as well. Even so, although the scale of the spatial tier had been unexpectedly limited, huge numbers of low-rank beasts and saint-rank beasts could still continue pouring through that opening and onto the battlefield. Meanwhile, General Tanluo, the real culprit behind all of this, used the opportunity to hide himself in a safe spot. He still felt a little lingering fear over it, of course, but thankfully that giant fish had done its job and dragged the old ancestor straight into the void. Otherwise, He truly had no idea how he would have faced punishment from the old ancestor herself. The only problem now was this. The scale of the current beast tide had gone far beyond his expectations. Even god-rank creatures had appeared. Because of that, he started worrying that the Yellow Hat Group and Milan might get cold feet and refuse to activate the rift generators in their hands. But with the bizarre kind of logic he was famous for, he very quickly came up with a fix. As long as he killed both sides' scouts before they could send the intelligence back, no one would ever know that a god-rank battle had taken place here. And in order to make sure the southbound diversion plan stayed on schedule, he immediately moved to carry out that idea. At the same time, the beasts pouring into this world from the rift could not care less about any of that. They surged forward in overwhelming numbers, marching non-stop toward Yong'an City. Since this wave of the beast tide had skipped over the southern wasteland Great Wall and erupted directly inside the defensive line, City Lord Kong Fan had no choice but to personally take command from the city walls. He ordered the City Guard army to rely on the walls and hold the line, while also dispersing the City Lord Manor's personal guard into the different companies to supervise the battle and keep morale from collapsing. And although the soldiers standing atop the walls had already received word that the beast tide was coming, when that moment truly arrived, every last one of them still held their breath in tension. But when disaster strikes, every man has a duty. To protect the civilians behind them, the moment City Lord Kong Fan gave the order to engage, the soldiers launched their most desperate counterattack against the beast tide without the slightest hesitation. And just like that, the Battle of the Southern Wasteland officially began. In an extremely short time after the beast tide erupted, the southeastern side of Yong'an City was almost completely sealed off by the endless flood of beasts. Unable to break through the city walls head-on, the low-rank beasts began using Bifang-type beasts to airdrop them in, that let them force their way onto the city walls, causing huge trouble for the city guard soldiers responsible for holding the defense. At the same time, the beasts below the walls took advantage of the weakened human firepower and began climbing upward by stacking themselves like ladders. Soon, massive numbers of Taudi-type beasts made it onto the walls and crashed into the city guard army in savage close-quarters combat. Almost the instant the melee erupted, the casualty reports from the city guard began rising like madness. Across the chaotic battlefield, the screams of humans and beasts rose and fell without end. From atop the city tower, City Lord Kong Fan kept directing defensive fire toward every section of the wall that had been breached. At the same time, he amplified his voice with soul power and shouted across the battlefield, telling everyone to hold the line in the name of the City Guard army and wait for reinforcements from the rear command. Those iron-hard words from the City Lord immediately drew a fierce response from the soldiers. The anti-air firepower that had weakened just moments ago suddenly roared back to full strength. Large numbers of Bifang-type beasts, along with the low-rank beasts hanging beneath them, were torn out of the sky by the dense barrage from the human side. Even so, a small number of low-rank beasts that survived the fall still crashed onto the wall and immediately clashed in close-quarters combat with the City Lord Manor's personal guard, who had been supervising the battle. Just like that, the battle atop the wall entered a temporary stalemate. But everyone knew the real threat in this beast tide was still those few beetle-type saint-rank beasts in the distance, charging straight toward the walls. That scene was terrifying enough to nearly scare the souls out of the Shadow Guard informants stationed on the high ground around the walls, the ones responsible for relaying battlefield intelligence. In response, Recon Scout number 1610 of Shadow Guard Group 2 immediately reported to Rear Command over the comm line that a giant beetle-type beast several hundred meters tall had appeared outside Yong'an City, southeast at the 3 o'clock direction. The tactical binoculars in his hands then transmitted the battlefield footage back in real time. He followed up at once, stating that those 4 giant monsters were expected to reach the city walls in about 20 minutes. At the same time, inside the main command center, every member of the Song family saw that apocalyptic scene projected before them in holographic form. The old Marquis immediately turned to Song Yongzhang and asked whether those were the same kind of saint-rank beasts he had mentioned on his way back from Yuanding City. Second Aunt and Song Yongxiu, meanwhile, were visibly shaken when they saw saint-rank monsters towering hundreds of meters tall. If this had only been an ordinary beast tide, they might still have managed to accept it. But being forced to think of a way to defeat monsters on that level was way beyond what they could handle. Song Yongxiang told everyone to calm down first and not panic. The beast tide had indeed come earlier and more suddenly than expected, but the truth was, they had still made some preparations for exactly this kind of situation. Even though the beast tide had erupted between Yong'an City and the southern wasteland Great Wall, far outside their original expectations, that did not necessarily make it a bad thing. Song Yongxiang then marked the reinforcement routes of the main forces on the tactical map and told everyone that as long as they could hold Yong'an City with the lowest possible losses, they could organize a counteroffensive and join up with the Iron Wall Army, the Scarlet Luan Army, and Shishui's Azure Kestrel Army to form a massive encirclement and wipe out every last beast. He emphasized that from then on, They only had one objective. All combat personnel had to hold Yang'an City and cover the civilians as they evacuated to safe zones. If they pulled that off, then they would win the first phase of this beast tide. Right after that, Song Yongxiang used the command channel to issue battle orders to the major clans inside Yang'an City, as well as several Heaven Rank and Earth Rank experts among the Shadow Guards. He ordered them to lead their forces in urban guerrilla operations and intercept the beasts that had already broken through the city wall defenses, buying more time for the evacuation of the civilians. As for the rest of their fighting strength, it would all be sent to reinforce the wall itself and focus on stopping those 4 beetle-type Saint-rank beasts at all costs, slowing their advance toward the walls and creating a perfect opening for their own 4 Saint-rank powerhouses to land a decapitation strike. Once those 2 objectives had been fully carried out, they could begin pulling the defensive line inward and drive the beast tide toward the southeastern side of Yang'an City. After that, they would join up with the other 3 main forces, complete the encirclement, and wipe the beast tide out for good. At that, the old Marquis was the first to step forward and openly support Song Yongxiang's plan. And when his older cousin Xiao Xian heard that endless military merit was practically waving at her from the battlefield, she instantly got fired up too, looking like she wanted to charge out right then and start slaughtering her way through the enemy. In response, Song Yongxiang quietly told every Song family member present that he still had one more major piece of news, the kind that could truly lift morale, and that he wanted to discuss it with them. The people present, however, were completely confused. None of those battle-hardened military minds could understand how there could possibly be any good news worth getting excited about in the middle of a disaster like this. In response, Song Yongxiang told everyone that in the battles ahead, they should preserve the beasts' corpses as much as possible. Miss Hong's Hong Clan Merchant Guild would be handling all post-battle cleanup and recovery work. That meant the beast cores and other resources left on the battlefield would become the wealth and supplies needed for their next round of fighting. And once this battle was over, the Song family might not rise completely in one shot, but they would absolutely make a massive profit. The old Marquis, being a man who understood the bigger picture, clearly admired Song Yongxiang's deal. Xiao Xian, on the other hand, only cared about military merit, so she pointed right at him and cursed him for being shamelessly greedy, saying he was actually trying to make war money at a time like this. As for everyone else, each of them had their own thoughts and concerns. In response, Song Yongxiang told them to think further ahead. This beast tide would never be the last one. More enemies were coming, and the ones after this would only be harder to deal with. That was why this batch of resources and wealth would play a critical role in upgrading their combat strength for what was still ahead. After hearing how much they stood to gain, the others gradually came to understand Song Yongxiang's reasoning and agreed to cooperate. Song Yongxiang then told them to move out immediately and do their part for the future of the Eastern Continent. At the same time, inside the southeastern district of Yang'an City, a city guard squad escorting civilians to the air harbor for evacuation suddenly ran into a beast attack and was forced to hold its ground on the spot. Just when they were at a loss, they suddenly heard Old Master Kong Zheng roaring from behind them, telling them all to get out of the way and stop stealing his military merit. And as a Heaven Rank expert, Kong Zheng did not disappoint. With a single strike, he wiped out the amphibious beast blocking the road. Right after that, he kicked the stunned Huado-type beast beside it, flying with one brutal blow. Seeing that, the beasts panicked. In the blink of an eye, they used aerial drops to bring in a second batch of monsters, preparing to hunt down the human soldiers in the area. But when Old Master Kong Zheng saw that, he only got even more excited. He immediately displayed the Heaven Rank expert's signature ability to walk on air, showing off so hard that the city guard soldiers behind him were left dumbfounded. Then he unleashed the Kong clan's secret art, Hongyi 1,000-pound step. With one stomp, he crushed the Taodi-type beast that had dared to bark at him. To him, beasts at roughly black rank level like this were not worth mentioning at all. A casual move was more than enough to deal with them. But Kong Zheng, who was used to fighting humans more than beasts, had forgotten one key thing. Beasts loved swarming their targets. Just as he turned to deal with the amphibious beast behind him, another Taodi-type beast suddenly lunged in and grabbed the right arm of his construct. Even so, in the face of overwhelming strength, tricks like that only made Old Kong use a little more force. On top of that, Old Kong's self-created combat techniques all carried a bit of showmanship to them. Watching him recite poetry while carving a bloody path through the beasts across the entire street sent the morale of that city guard squad through the roof. Meanwhile, on Fuxing Street in another part of the southeastern district, another disaster was unfolding as stranded civilians were being chased down by beasts. And as if things were not bad enough, the girl named Xiao Mei tripped during the escape, causing both of them to lose their chance to keep running. Faced with that, the boy named Xiao Zhu could only force down his fear. He shoved Xiao Mei away and told her to run on her own, while he stayed behind to face the beast coming from the rear. The starving beast, however, did not care about any of that. It raised its claw and attacked the two children without hesitation. But at that critical moment, Aga, the leader of Shadow Guard Group 1, arrived at the battlefield in time. In the next instant, he constructed a firepower specialized Wei Yuan unit armed with dual shield guns and blocked the beast's attack for the two children. After raising his shield and taking the beast's first 3 savage blows head-on, Aga immediately switched from defense to offense. He grabbed the shield gun and started smashing it straight into the beast's face again and again, forcing it backward and away from the civilians. The little boy he had just saved was so stunned by that scene that it felt no less shocking than witnessing a god descend to the mortal world. But the Taudi-type beast, furious that its prey had been stolen right from its jaws, instantly went berserk and prepared to level all of Fuxing Street with a plasma cannon. In response, Aga shoved the shield gun straight into the beast's mouth, forcibly interrupting the charge-up. Then he instantly switched it into shotgun mode, and at near point-blank range, blasted the beast in front of him into shredded gore. After witnessing the whole thing, the two children could not help marveling at the sheer heroic presence of a Star Soul master hunting beasts. But there was no time on the battlefield to savor that moment, because not long after the fight ended, several more beasts rushed over after hearing the noise, pushing the situation right back to the edge. Aga immediately told the little boy to take his crybaby companion and get out of there fast. He would hold the line and cover their escape. Meanwhile, Jin, who had been upstairs the whole time using a sniper special ops Wei Yuan unit to cover them, could not help laughing when he saw all that. He truly had not expected quiet, taciturn Aga to put on a bigger show in a fight than he did. Jokes aside though, once the real fighting started, Jin, the leader of Shadow Guard Group 2, was every bit as fierce as Aga from the action team. With a few perfectly placed precision shots, he dropped 3 Bifang-type beasts in a flash, his kill efficiency even outpacing Aga downstairs by quite a bit. At the same time, the Qin family of Yong'an City, who were defending Latitude 3rd Street, showed no sign of backing down. Led by family head Chen Xian, not a single one of them retreated. Every last one straightened their backs and faced the beast horde head-on. Chen Xian himself charged first, immediately beginning his Star Soul construct, while the Qin family disciples behind him followed their family head forward without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, thunderous battle cries echoed through all of Latitude 3rd Street, while the beasts invading that area were beaten down so hard they could barely raise their heads. Meanwhile, Chu Dasheng, the Chu family head leading the defense on Latitude 4th Street, instantly got fired up the moment he heard the fighting erupt next door. He immediately led the Chu family disciples under him to reinforce the Qin family, determined to make sure that when the time came to split the spoils after the battle, the Chu family would not fall behind the other top-tier clans. At the same time, the Dao family, who were stationed on Latitude 1st Street, had already finished setting up their firing positions and were calmly waiting for the enemy. Family head Tao Lin also reminded his people not to let their guard down or neglect their duty just because the battle next door had already started. One of his personal guards was somewhat confused by that. He genuinely could not understand why the family head insisted on having them construct early and repeatedly reset their defensive formation. No matter how much soul power the brothers had, it still could not stand that kind of drain. So another guard seized the moment to suggest that everyone cancel their constructs for now and take a short breather on the spot to recover some soul power. But Tao Lin flatly rejected the idea. Strict caution, he said, was the ancestral principle that had allowed the Tao family to survive in this world. He then ordered the 2 guards to distribute soul-restoring pills to the rest of the Dao family disciples. Those pills had cost him a fortune to obtain from the Hong Clan Merchant Guild, but if there was one thing the Dao family did not lack, it was money. He was spending without hesitation for one reason only. He wanted the Dao family to survive this beast-tide battle intact. He did not dare dream of some world-shaking achievement. All he wanted was for the Dao family members under him to return home safely with him after the battle. And after hearing those words, the Dao family disciples were so moved they were nearly bowing from the waist, each one swearing loyalty to the family unto death and vowing never to betray it. Right after that, Tao Lin ordered them to remain at their assigned defensive positions, stay fully alert, and not let the distribution of pills throw their formation into disorder. However, just as these great families were all fighting on their own fronts, several cries of despair suddenly rang out across the entirety of neighboring Latitude 6th Street. There, a father pinned beneath collapsed rubble desperately told his family to stop trying to save him and run for their lives. But his wife and 2 daughters stubbornly clung to his hand and refused to leave. And what drove him even deeper into despair was the sight of a Bifang-type beast spotting them and diving down from the sky to launch an attack. At that moment, he completely ignored his own injuries and used every last bit of strength in his body to scream at his family to get out of there. But right at that moment, a spinning battle axe came slashing down from the sky at incredible speed and forcibly gave that family a chance to live. The Bifang-type beast that had been about to strike them did not even have time to react before it was split clean in 2 on the spot. And after finishing that attack, the returning axe flew right back into Zisu's hand. Even then, Zisu's playful side still had not faded one bit. She actually struck a pose on purpose to show off how strong she was, all while loudly praising herself as a natural-born combat genius. Right behind her, Liani and Songlin also rushed onto the scene, arriving just in time to pull that trapped family of 4 out of immediate danger. The rescued family was naturally overwhelmed with gratitude, but whether it was the units or the paintwork, they had no way of telling which force those girls belonged to. However, just as the 3 were about to reveal their identities, several shrill cries from Bifong-type beasts suddenly rang out overhead, and the tension snapped tight again. Zisu immediately turned to check what was happening, only to be startled by the sight in front of her. Before any of them could even react, those Bifong-type beasts had already lined up in attack formation, ready to wipe out the girls and that family of 4 in one sweep. In response, Liani and Songlin could only hurry forward and place themselves in front of the family, preparing to take the blow for them. But at that critical moment, more than 10 sensing armaments came tearing in at high speed, and in an instant, they assembled into a massive round shield of soul power above their heads, blocking the incoming attack for the girls and the family alike. Right after that, the sensing armaments released their defensive formation and flew back, then reassembled themselves into a shield in their owner's hand. The maid squad girls saw that scene and immediately realized who had arrived. The appearance of King Dai, the heaven rank head maid, felt like a shot of adrenaline straight to the heart, instantly filling them with a deep sense of security. No matter how reckless or careless those sisters could get, she would always be the one handling the cleanup and covering for them at the end. Once King Dai arrived on the Latitude 6th Street battlefield, Zisu and Songlin finally let out a breath of relief. At least now, they no longer had to worry about being swallowed up alive by the beasts surrounding them. King Dai immediately reminded them that this was no longer a simulated combat exercise. Everyone needed to sharpen up at once, end the fight as fast as possible, and cover the civilians' retreat. After hearing the order, Zisu was the first to move. After all, when it came to striking first and stealing the momentum, she was a professional. The spinning axe in her hand shot into the sky like a bolt. Unfortunately, that strike did not deal nearly as much damage as she had hoped. The beast she hit only lost half its body before crashing hard to the ground, and it still was not dead. The rest of the Bifong-type beasts closing in were also completely enraged by that blow. They shrieked at the top of their lungs and dived straight down at the girls. In response, Songlin told the others to fall back a little, saying that this suicidal beast was hers to deal with. In the next second, the twin short blades mounted at her waist flashed out and sliced across the beast's face, forcibly interrupting its attack. Meanwhile, King Dai, who was holding the rear and anchoring the formation for them, began constructing the auspicious Cloud Knot combined shield, creating the best possible opening for Liani's snipe. In response, Liani immediately constructed a specialized light screen and prepared for the shot, while also keeping her unit planted in front of the civilians just in case. On King Dai's side, she released all of her vermilion rulers at once, sending them out to interfere with the Bifang-type beasts in the air. However, those vermilion rulers did not directly deal any damage to the beasts themselves. At first, the sensing armaments merely darted around the monsters in every direction, drawing their attention and throwing off their focus. But by the time the beast realized something was wrong, every single vermilion ruler had already slipped into its assigned attack position according to plan. The moment King Dai saw that the timing was perfect, she immediately activated the binding formation, crimson-dyed red adornment, completely sealing off the beast's movements. Right after that, she gave Liani the order to fire, aiming to end the battle as quickly as possible. Liani did not hesitate in the slightest. 3 fully charged soul power beams that had long been prepared shot out in an instant. As long as it was something that could help young Master Yang Xiang, she would always give it everything she had. Those soul power beams tore through the sky with perfect precision and shattered the Bifong-type beasts one after another. Watching that pinpoint sniping from the side, Zisu immediately started praising her sister's skill, saying that if it had been her, there was no way she could have pulled off a triple shot with 3 straight headshots. Liani, however, showed no sign of pride at all. Instead, she immediately turned to Songlin, who still had not finished off her target, and asked whether she needed support. Songlin, in response, told them not to worry. She said she was only using her first real battle as a chance to get some practice in and had not run into any real trouble at all. In the next instant, she seized the exact moment the beast launched its energy strike and cut in at high speed through the blind spot of its attack. One clean, decisive slash. Later, the beast she had been using to warm up was dead. Even then, she still showed off in front of the others, declaring that black rank beasts like that could not possibly shake earth rank experts like them in the slightest. Hearing that, Zisu immediately got a little annoyed and blurted out a jab, asking if Songlin had been the reincarnation of some bragging king because she really knew how to show off. As for the beast that had already lost half its body, it clearly was not happy either. Struggling from the ground, it forced itself back up, as if it still wanted to teach them a lesson. Unfortunately for it, that move only became the perfect outlet for Zissou to vent her mood. With a backhand swing of her axe, she sliced the beast clean in half at the waist. Then, with a smug look on her face, she told the others that she also knew a thing or two about showing off. She just usually kept a low profile and did not flaunt it. King Dai, meanwhile, paid no attention to their joking around. She directly ordered one of them to contact the logistics team to come assist the Hong Clan Merchant Guild with extracting the beast cores, while the rest were to follow her and prepare to move to the next street. As for the civilian family they had rescued, King Dai clearly informed them that their maid squad, which belonged to the eastern courtyard of the Song residence under the Marquis of Juan, had already cleared out all nearby beasts under young Master Yang Xiang's orders, so they could now continue evacuating toward the safe zone in western Yong'an. The family was naturally overwhelmed with gratitude, bowing again and again to thank them for saving their lives. Zissou, however, waved it off and told them not to be so formal, then even struck what she thought was an especially cool pose as she said goodbye. Seeing that, the younger daughter of the family was completely captivated by Zissou and the others, blurting out that one day she wanted to be just like those older sisters and pilot a beautiful Star Soul general to save people in danger. Her older sister, on the other hand, did not look nearly as excited on the surface, but during that short exchange, she had already firmly engraved two names into her heart: the Song residence of the Marquis of Juan and young Master Yang Xiang. Meanwhile, the Liu family, who had been assigned to defend latitude 5th Street, chose to hide all around the street and lay a deadly net for the beasts. Every Liu family disciple, along with family head Lu Xinong himself, had already made full preparations for this battle. The moment the beasts stepped fully into the trap, the first thing that greeted them was a storm of soul power beams blasting in from every direction. As soon as the beast formation was thrown into chaos, Lu Xinong immediately ordered all Liu family combatants to switch to melee gear, split the enemy apart, and surround them piece by piece, making sure they were never allowed to regroup. During the fight, he kept urging everyone to speed up their kills, because the scouts he had sent out had already reported that another wave of low-rank beasts was on its way toward their defense sector. In response, the Liu family warriors pushed their kill efficiency even higher. Every assault squad moved in teams of 3, with every strike aimed straight at the beast's vital points. And those young men did not let their family head down. It did not take long before that entire batch of beasts had been wiped out completely. Even then, Lu Xinong did not have the leisure to let his disciples stop and recover their soul power. He immediately ordered everyone back to their ambush positions to prepare for the next wave. At the same time, as more and more beasts were airdropped into the city, fierce fighting also erupted on latitude 1st Street, where the Dao family was holding the line. However, with the support of soul-restoring pills, the Dao family fighters maintained a dense and steady stream of firepower the entire time that left those thick-skinned beasts completely unable to do anything against them for the moment. By the time the last Taodi-type beast had been riddled full of holes, one of Tao Lin's deputies immediately reported to him that the first wave had already been completely wiped out, and everyone's soul power reserves were still in very solid shape. In response, Tao Lin first praised the disciples for their performance, but still ordered them to remain fully alert and not let themselves relax for even a second. The Tao family warriors also remembered their slogan to go in whole and come out whole, and shouted it in unison, determined to finish this battle with the fewest losses possible. However, just as their morale was surging higher and higher, Tao Lin's deputy suddenly warned everyone that a second wave of enemies had already appeared in the street. And just as extremes always bring reversal, the second batch of beast also came with a Chongqi-type beast, whose strength was on par with a heaven-rank expert. Seeing that, Tao Lin was immediately put in a difficult position, because he truly could not understand why a beast of that level had shown up on the city battlefield so quickly. But before he could issue any further orders, the Kyongchi-type beast let out a furious roar and charged together with the other low-rank beasts, clearly intending to smash through the defense line in one strike. The moment that first heaven-rank beast appeared on the latitude 1st Street defense line, the second phase of the defense of Yong'an City officially began. Tao Lin immediately ordered all his men to stop firing, remain on guard, and withdraw from their positions as quickly as possible, temporarily avoiding the edge of the heaven-rank beast's assault. The reason he made that decision was simple. Tao Lin, at his core, was still just a merchant with relatively weak combat ability. Before the battle, he had obtained a barrier-breaking pill from young Master Yang Xiang and successfully broken through to the early stage heaven rank. But asking a businessman like him, whose combat skill was far from exceptional, to face a heaven rank beast alone was still something he had no real confidence in. Because of that, the Dao family fighters could only obey the order, pull out of the temporary position, and retreat together with their family head. The beasts, however, clearly had no intention of giving them a clean escape. Their pursuit accelerated immediately as they lunged wildly at what looked like an easy human target. Seeing that, one of Tao Lin's deputies immediately asked whether they should open fire and try to slow the beasts down. Otherwise, the enemy would smash through the line and catch them in no time. But Tao Lin ordered everyone not to lose their composure. He told them to maintain the defensive formation exactly as planned and retreat in an orderly way. A beast of that level was simply not something they could handle head-on. At the same time, Song Yongxiang, seated in the Song Residence Command Center, continued reviewing the battlefield reports pouring in from every direction and redeploying the forces in his hands wherever they were needed. As for his cousin Song Yongxiu, she was acting as his adjutant for the moment, mainly handling coordination with the logistics team for core recovery. The Eastern Courtyard Maid Squad he had sent out earlier also reported back at this moment, saying they had completed their first rescue mission and were already heading toward the next target area. But good news always seemed to come together with bad news. The Dao family on Latitude 1st Street urgently reported that they were already under pursuit from a Heaven-rank beast and needed other Heaven-rank fighters from command to reinforce them immediately. In response, Song Yongxiang instantly connected to the Shadow Guard's communication channel and ordered the intelligence officers of Shadow Guard Group 2 to notify Jin and Aga to suspend their rescue mission at once and head straight to Latitude 1st Street for support. The old Marquis, who had been sitting off to the side and observing the overall situation, was also visibly shaken when he heard the Dao family's call for help. He had not expected a Heaven-rank beast to appear inside the city this quickly either, and he immediately started worrying that the wall defense might already have been fully breached. Song Yongxiang then contacted the Shadow Guard Group 2 scout hidden at an elevated point near the city walls, in order to get a clearer picture of the real frontline situation. The reply he received was that most of the beasts entering the city were still getting in through aerial drops, but multiple sections of the walls had already developed major cracks. Based on that, the scout believed the wall defense would not be able to hold much longer, and according to his rough estimate, the casualty rate among the City Guard Army and the City Lord Manor's personal guards still fighting on the walls had already passed 20%. Even the tower where City Lord Kong Fan was personally directing the battle was now surrounded by beasts and could collapse at any moment. In response, Song Yongxiang immediately ordered the scout to notify City Lord Kong Fan and have him blow open these 4 sections of the wall, deliberately allowing the beasts into the city. The moment he heard that order, the old Marquis could no longer sit still. He immediately demanded to know what Song Yongxiang meant by that, but Song Yongxiu instead told the old Marquis to calm down first and let her explain, because she had already understood the strategic intention behind Song Yongxiang's move. She then explained that her cousin Yongxiang intended to use those 4 gaps to funnel the beasts into the city in an orderly flow, which would ease the pressure on the defenders holding the walls. Once those redirected beasts stopped climbing the walls and instead swarmed toward those 4 breaches, the concentrated beast tide would actually slow down the advance of the 4 Saint-rank beasts behind them, creating a better opening for their own Saint-rank experts to carry out a decapitation strike. After hearing that explanation, the members of the Song family all immediately came to a realization. Once a clear breakthrough route existed, the beasts really would gather in the direction she described. That way, not only would they no longer have to worry about the beasts spreading out across every section of the wall to cause destruction, but they could also effectively slow the Saint-rank beast movement. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And when Song Yongxiang saw that she had understood his layout in a single glance, a thought quietly formed in his mind. He wanted to let his second elder sister temporarily take over the command seat and see how she handled it. Ever since childhood, she had shown a gift for tactical command. Back in Preparatory Academy, she had won all kinds of chess championships for 3 straight years, and was even known as the Song family's little chess saint. If second uncle had not dragged her back into business later on, she would have grown into an outstanding commander. The moment that idea settled, Song Yongxiang stopped hesitating and directly told her that the situation was too complicated and he needed to head to the front line to personally inspect what was happening. So from that point on, the temporary command there would be hers. That decision immediately drew fierce opposition from second uncle. From beginning to end, he had always believed that a woman like Yongxiu should never be entrusted with such a critical responsibility. As for second aunt, while she did not openly object, she still stepped forward at once and grabbed her daughter's arm, clearly hoping to force Yongxiu to obey her father and give up this opportunity. In response, the sensible Yongxiu could only put on a timid front and quietly tell Song Yongxiang that her abilities were still insufficient and that she might not be worthy of taking that position. The old Marquis, who clearly understood what was going on, stepped forward at that moment to back Yongxiu up. He said he trusted Song Yongxiang's judgment and told him to head to the front line without worry. With old men like them holding the rear, nothing here would fall into chaos. In response, Song Yongxiang asked the old Marquis to notify all sides that command of the Song residence would be temporarily handed over to cousin Yongxiu. He also told her that if anything came up that she could not handle, she was to contact him immediately. And Yongxiu, who was finally being given a real chance to show what she could do in front of everyone, took a deep breath after receiving support from Song Yongxiang and the old Marquis, forcing herself to steady her emotions. Then she solemnly promised Song Yangxiang that she would not let him down, and that she would make sure everything here was properly arranged in his absence. After handing over command, Song Yangxiang wasted no more time and immediately left the command center, heading toward the front line to inspect the situation in person. At that, Mao, who had been disguised as a maid of the Eastern Courtyard, said that she would go into battle with Song Yangxiang as well. With that, she crushed the transformation talisman around her wrist and returned to her original demonkin form. With her joining him, Song Yangxiang would be able to save a huge amount of stamina and soul power while rushing between different frontline sectors afterward. At the same time, Song Yunhua took advantage of the fact that everyone's attention was locked on the Beast Tide and quietly brought Xiao Zhan all the way to the rear gate of the Song residence. Even though Xiao Ye, Zisu, and Mao had all already gone out to work, that still did not kill the little girl's desire to earn merit for herself. So she kept trying to talk Xiao Zhan into sneaking out with her to make a name for themselves. The moment she said that, she was already planning to drag Xiao Zhan out through the back gate while no one was paying attention. In response, Gongsun Zhanzhan immediately tried to persuade her, telling her to stay inside the Song residence and stop running around recklessly. But Yanhua, that fearless little troublemaker, refused to listen and just kept pulling Xiao Zhan farther outside. Meanwhile, because all the scouts previously sent over had gone missing, the Yellow Hat Group urgently dispatched a new scout to investigate the Beast Tide around Yong'an City. That scout, who had only just arrived in the wilderness outside Yong'an City, was deeply puzzled. He still had not figured out why a Beast Tide had suddenly erupted here, but judging from the shape of the rift, there was a very high chance that this wave had indeed been triggered by one of their rift generators. And the massive smoking crater not far away clearly showed that a battle at Saint rank level or even above had erupted here not long ago. Because of that, he roughly guessed that the matter was probably connected to the scouts who had disappeared earlier, but as for the truth, he had no way of tracing it yet. However, his investigation had barely even begun before his life had already reached its end, and the culprit behind all of this, after killing that scout, even carefully took away the man's communication wristband, so that the Yellow Hat Group would not be able to locate the corpse through tracking methods and dig up more clues from there. The reason General Tanluo was eliminating these scouts was because he feared that once the Yellow Hat Group and Millen learned that the rift generator carried a risk of going out of control, they would no longer dare to continue activating the southbound diversion operation. And if that happened, he would lose the chance to keep having fun with that fascinating kid named Song Yangxiang. Still, accidentally triggering a Beast Tide on this scale was definitely not what he had intended. So he was somewhat worried that the Yangxiang kid might hold a grudge against him afterward, because the losses had gotten too heavy. In response, his so-called genius brain quickly came up with the next remedy. Since he had already cleaned up the scouts and had nothing better to do, he might as well go help defend the city and make up for what he had done, so that the next time he met that kid, he would at least have something decent to say for himself. Of course, if he was going to do that, he absolutely had to conceal his identity. If the southbound diversion team saw him piloting the Star Soul General Red Boy while helping Tiandu Nation defend the city, then he could forget about surviving on the Millen side ever again. But there were always more solutions than problems. As long as he picked up a City Guard Soul General talisman from the wall and used that instead, he could cover his identity pretty well. Having made up his mind, he immediately flew toward Yong'an City and began carrying out what he believed to be his own brilliant plan. At the same time, the leader of the Yellow Hat Group was practically fuming from all 7 orifices back at headquarters, raging over the fact that every single scout had gone missing and demanding to know what the hell had happened. Right after that, he ordered his chief technician Yao Du to keep sending out more scouts to investigate the matter. No matter the price, he had to find out who exactly had triggered this Beast Tide. The appearance of that person had completely thrown all of his original arrangements into chaos. If Milun used the risk of the devices going out of control as an excuse to cancel the southbound diversion plan now, then he would lose his chance to use the chaos to draw out the doctor hiding behind Tai Yuan. At the moment, the only lead the Yellow Hat Group leader could think of was that this might have something to do with that newly ennobled young aristocrat from Tiandu Nation. Ever since his men had clashed with that person's team in the depths of the southern wasteland, several rift generators had mysteriously gone missing from headquarters. But no matter how he thought about it, he still could not understand why that person would activate those devices to attack his own side's territory. In response, he immediately ordered the head of the intelligence division to come see him. The intelligence chief, a man named Siju, stepped out from the shadows of headquarters at once and stood ready to receive the leader's orders. The leader immediately ordered Sizu to rearrange his intelligence personnel and launch a deep investigation into Song Yangxiang of Yong'an City. Even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground, he wanted every scrap of information from the last 6 months on that man. On top of that, the leader assigned Siju another task as well. Since his plan had already changed in ways he never expected, he now needed full intelligence on the force distribution and battlefield movements of all 3 sides across the southern wasteland theater. the beasts, Milan, and Tiandu. After accepting the tasks, Siju spoke bluntly and said that an unknown force near Yong'an City was secretly uprooting the lookout post they had planted. So this mission would probably be difficult to complete anytime soon. So the leader told him to change his methods and stop thinking so rigidly. Special circumstances called for special handling. Then he directly tripled the number of intelligence agents under Siju's command and ordered them to scout farther outside the Yong'an battlefield. If they could not figure out who had triggered the beast tide, then they were to investigate whether the intelligence agents from Milun and Tiandu had also suffered losses like they had. That way, they could at least judge who was secretly making moves behind the scenes. After that, the leader turned to his chief researcher, Yao Du, and asked about the mass production development progress of the second-generation fusion unit, as well as the stitched abomination model in Sand Sculpture City. Yao Du replied that they were still facing a massive shortage of beast core resources. Although testing data for the second-generation beast fusion unit was nearly complete, actual production was being held up by the exact same problem as the mass-produced Shark Sculpture King model: not enough materials. That said, progress on the re-enhancement tuning of the Super Enhanced Soldier series, which served as the core of the mass-produced Shark Sculpture King, had been extremely promising and had already reached 98%. Among them, test subject C025, Suda, had already completed tuning at Pseudo Saint Realm's second layer and could be deployed into real combat at any time to gather data. On top of that, it also picked up a highly interesting test subject on this front. That lucky kid seemed to possess absurdly strong compatibility with enhancement tuning. They had originally planned to hand him over to Milan as a sample for the Super Enhanced Soldier project and the Pseudo Saint tuning technology. But to everyone's surprise, his energy conversion rate reached 3.68 times Suda's and more than 5 times that of the other 3 test subjects. Even though those results were obtained at the cost of burning away 50% of his lifespan, in less than a month they had forcibly pushed his cultivation from early stage black rank all the way to Earth rank peak. If they completely ignored lifespan loss, then he could already be used right now for a heaven rank breakthrough test. That was why Yao Du asked the leader whether this subject should be thrown into real combat after the breakthrough test to gather more data. The leader, who was already irritated out of his mind because his plans had been thrown into chaos, answered with obvious impatience after hearing the report, stating that something that small should not need his approval and that they could make the call themselves. Yao Du immediately soothed him and said he understood what needed to be done. But just as he was about to turn and leave the war room, the leader suddenly spoke again and told him to stay. Then, while staring thoughtfully at the strategic map of Yong'an City, the leader asked how many beast cores they actually needed to fill the gap on their side. Yao Du replied at once that their reserves were already nearly exhausted, and right now the only thing they could do was send small teams deep into the southern wasteland to hunt beasts and barely keep the shortage from collapsing further. But Yao Du immediately sensed that there was something deeper behind the leader's question. The problem was that the method it implied carried serious risk, so he still needed the leader to issue a clear order. Meanwhile, Song Tu, the steward under First Uncle, was delivering a batch of combat supplies to Song Yunqi and his group of friends who had gathered inside the auditorium of Yong'an City's Mecha Martial Preparatory Academy. The moment Song Yunqi received the Star Soul General talismans and various pills specially prepared for him by his big brother, he immediately called Song Yongxiang to thank him, even shouting for his dear big brother over and over in front of everyone. In response, Song Yongxiang told him not to rush into thanking him yet, and made it clear that he knew exactly what that brat was planning to do. He had no reason to forcibly stop him, but before Song Yunqi left, there were several things he absolutely had to hammer into his head. If he ran into those lower domain type beasts that could fire needle volleys during combat, he had to be especially careful. Even in ordinary fighting, he absolutely could not get reckless or overcommit. Casualties in a city defense battle might be unavoidable, but it still was not the turn of children like them to pay that price. He had to remember that he was still just a kid, and that a much longer road still lay ahead of him. Unfortunately, Song Yunqi clearly treated every one of Song Yongxiang's warnings like background noise. His mind was completely locked onto those pill resources and specially prepared talismans. After giving a few perfunctory replies, he hurriedly hung up the call. Still, he also understood that his personal strength alone was not enough to change the overall war situation, which was exactly why he had gathered all his little companions inside the auditorium. The next second, he leaped onto the stage in one bound, swept his arm dramatically, and asked the crowd whether they understood the state of the battle in Yong'an City. From what he knew so far, the Preparatory Academy Student Union and the third-year seniors had already followed the instructors and school leadership to support the City Guard Army, while most of the first and second-year students had also been called back by their families to take part in the city defense. But now the beasts had already broken through the city guard lines and were rampaging through the city. Countless civilians had been forced to flee the homes they relied on to survive. helplessly watching as the beasts trampled and tore apart the lives they once had. And although, aside from Sun Yanan, most of the family heirs gathered here were bottom-ranked underachievers, Song Yunki believed that as Star Soul Masters who had inherited immortal general legacies and possessed two soul vein aptitude, they had no right to hide under their family's protection and pretend not to see this tragedy unfolding. If they possessed both the will and the strength to kill beasts, then they also had the duty to protect the people. Even so, he had no intention of forcing everyone to follow him onto the battlefield. So right there on the spot, he pointed out an escape route for those cowards who did not dare fight beasts head-on. There was a safe zone in Yong'an City's western district that was specifically set up to shelter the elderly, the weak, women, and children. As for those willing to fight at his side, they would follow him straight to the eastern front. That was the first line where the beasts had smashed their way into the city, the place where heroes were bleeding and fighting to the death. Anyone with guts could step forward, claim a talisman from him, and join him in Star Soul Construct. They would use the bodies of soul generals to build a 100-foot iron wall and protect their home. Even if they had to burn through their last drop of soul power, they would make those damned beasts understand one thing: the fire of humanity would never go out. After hearing that pre-battle speech from below the stage, Chu Heng and Lin Chen were completely fired up as well. As direct line or branch descendants of their respective families' third generation, neither of them wanted to lose to Yunqiu. Even if they only had early stage and mid-stage black rank strength right now, they were still willing to contribute their share to Yong'an City. Sun Yanan, who only had mid-stage black rank strength, did not even hesitate. She immediately declared that she would go to the front line alongside classmate Yunqiu. Zhao Lingxi, a direct line descendant of the Zhao family, also stepped forward and said that her grandfather had once told her that the Zhao family would live and die with the Song family, sharing fortune and hardship alike. So even though she was only mid-stage black rank, she would still fight alongside classmate Yunqiu. Su Xiao, the granddaughter of the Su family head, also decided to move together with the group. She was not particularly skilled in direct combat, so she could only take on support and logistics duties. Even so, she seriously promised that she would not drag everyone down. As for the proud Miss Qin Xingyao, who was also at mid-stage black rank, she arrogantly declared that there was no need for Song Yunqi to provoke her into action, because she had already planned to head out with the older brothers in her family to support her grandfather in battle. In response, Sun Mo, the orphan specially taken in by the Sun family to protect Sun Yanan, felt a headache coming on. With his secretly hidden early-stage Earth rank strength, protecting Sun Yanan's safety was not actually a problem. What he was really worried about was whether the soft and sweet-tempered young lady could handle all these potential love rivals around her. Tao Zhou, a branch descendant of the Tao family, had also inherited the Tao family's trademark caution. So he proposed that everyone should stay level-headed and not get swept away by hot blood and make decisions beyond what their strength could handle. Hearing that, Lin Chen immediately got furious and told him on the spot to go hide in the safe zone in the west instead of standing there embarrassing himself. Chu Heng meanwhile stepped forward to smooth things over, telling him not to force himself and that nobody here would blame him even if he chose not to go. In response, Song Yunqi said that the fact that their cultivation levels were still a bit low was not really a big issue. His father had often taught him that because many soldiers never rose beyond the lower ranks, as long as they stood firm before the beasts and never backed down, they were still true warriors. And Song Yunqi also had real confidence in calling them all here. His amazing big brother had personally sent him a new model Wei Yuan Star Soul General Talisman, along with all kinds of pills and supplies, so this operation was definitely going to go smoothly. With that, he told Steward Song Tu to open the box in his hands and let everyone witness the heaven-defying methods of his big brother. The moment everyone saw what was inside, every last one of them was left staring in shock. Treasure belonged in the hands of heroes. For young men and women daring to resist the beast invasion, these rare resources, things their own families seldom ever saw, were like a blessing, urging them to carve their own legends into the history of humankind. And once Song Yunqi started introducing the glorious deeds of his big brother, that brat was practically glowing with pride. He went around bragging to everyone that his brother was the host of the Star Soul General Zuo Ci, had become a heaven-ranked powerhouse at only 18, had single-handedly turned the tide at Yuanding City, and had even been personally ennobled by His Majesty as Baron of Lingbei, an invincible hero beyond compare. At that, his little companions begged him to tone it down a bit, because he had already told them all this countless times at school. Besides, the families behind them had all warned them not to casually provoke Lord Yangxiang, but in the minds of most girls, the name Song Yangxiang was basically synonymous with a dangerous figure. If any child in the family refused to behave, all it took was one line warning that Song Yangxiang was coming, and they would instantly quiet down. When they were little, the elders in their families often used his name to scare them. In the eyes of the boys, however, Senior Song's name carried an entirely different meaning. To them, he was the kind of legend their whole generation looked up to. Back when he was still in school, he had been the campus tyrant who had supposedly seen through every generation of school beauties, and rumor even had it that the beautiful female instructor had shared a very ambiguous relationship with him. Even though he had long since graduated, the tales he left behind still inspired young family heirs like them. At that point, Miss Chin Sing Yao suddenly raised her hand and slapped Lin Chen hard across the face, telling that low-level idiot to change the subject immediately and stop talking. And while Chin Sing Yao and Lin Chen were arguing over that, Sun Mo, both Sun Yanan's classmate and her bodyguard, could not help recalling the time he had secretly investigated Song Yongxiang when the young miss first enrolled. Back then, he had even briefly clashed with the Song family shadow guards. So even now, he still wanted to know whether Song Yongxiang's transformation had anything to do with the old rumors surrounding Song Lang and his wife, or whether that man had simply been hiding his edge and biding his time all along. At the same time, seeing that a bit of friction was starting to spark among his companions, Song Yunqi quickly jumped in to change the subject, explaining that their understanding of his big brother was honestly only surface level. The truly terrifying part about him was actually his alchemy and forging skill. These special edition Wei Yuan Academy units Steward Song Tu brought over, along with this entire stockpile of pills, all came from his big brother's own hands. After showing all that off, Song Yunqi looked so proud that his nose practically tilted into the sky. And once the people below the stage realized what they were looking at, every one of them was stunned. They simply could not believe that something as ridiculously expensive on the market as soul-restoring pills was being handed out for free in this quantity by Senior Yongxiang. And on top of that, there were also absurd amounts of revitalization pills here. With supplies like this, even if they wanted to die in this operation, they probably would not die that easily. Sun Mo, who had just been deep in thought a moment ago, felt like his entire worldview had just been smashed to pieces. He was not especially knowledgeable about all the different kinds of pills and what they did, but as a bodyguard and combatant, he still recognized the burst speed pill at a glance. And that golden bottle in particular looked extraordinary from the moment he saw it. Zhao Lingxi, meanwhile, was so shocked by the sight of those treasures that she could not even speak at first. She had already heard that her family had recently been helping young Master Yongxiang distribute pills in secret to cover his tracks. But actually seeing him casually hand out that many priceless treasures still left her amazed by how ridiculously lavish his moves were. And because she knew more about pills than most of the others, the moment she got a clear look at that golden bottle, she could no longer sit still, immediately asking classmate Yunqi if that bottle was the yellow spirit pill that could directly raise yellow rank by one minor stage. The instant those words came out, everyone's attention snapped toward the bottle. Because if there really was yellow spirit pill here, then several of them might be able to break straight into the next rank on the spot. In response, Yunqi told them all to calm down and stop acting like country bumpkins seeing the world for the first time. He even bragged shamelessly that stuff like this was just ordinary little trinkets in his family, and that he usually treated them like candy beans. Then he patted his chest and told everyone that as long as they followed him from now on, one thing was guaranteed: they would never run short on pills. The moment Lin Chen heard that, his eyes lit up, and he blurted out that if Brother Song did not abandon him, he was willing to take Brother Song as his righteous father. The second Chin Sing Yao heard him calling someone his righteous father, she immediately smacked him on the head again and told him to roll as far away as possible instead of humiliating himself here. Yunqi then told them all to stop bickering among themselves and shifted the topic to the special edition Wei Yuan Star Soul General talismans his big brother had sent specifically for them. At first glance, however, those talismans did not look all that different from the standard academy units issued by the preparatory school, so most people were not particularly interested. But Tao Zhou, who had always been more interested in forging than the rest, immediately guessed that these special edition Wei Yuan models had to be far stronger than the ordinary academy units they usually used. Yunqi nodded on the spot and told him he had guessed exactly right. These special edition Wei Yuan units were improved Star Soul Generals redesigned by his big brother after analyzing the abilities of the origin Star Soul Generals. Right now, they had only been installed in a small number of elite units and direct Song family forces. Other families could beg all they wanted and still fail to get their hands on them. Right after that, Yunqi began introducing the functions and recommended uses of each model. For example, the heavy armor model had absurd defensive performance and was best suited for holding the front line head-on. It served as the guardian of the squad, drawing aggro and protecting teammates. When charging into battle, it could choose to dual-wield giant shields or spiked maces and become a fearless vanguard that ripped open enemy lines by force. The artillery model, on the other hand, specialized in precise long-range firepower. It was best suited for Star Soul Masters with high soul power conversion efficiency and fine control over their output. Depending on battlefield needs, it could mount dual cannon barrels or be paired with a honeycomb cannon setup. making it the absolute main damage core of the squad for long-range suppression, anti-air combat, and crowd clearing. As for the flying sword type Wei Yuan unit, which mounted 8 telekinetic sensing flying swords on its arms, that one required the pilot to possess fast reflexes, agility, and powerful spiritual perception. In combat, it could flexibly combine sword, shield, and crossbow configurations. At long range, it could kite and harass. At mid-range, it could disrupt enemies and support allies. And at close range, it could even take on multiple foes at once. It was the perfect mobile skirmisher and execution unit for precision finishing. The shield gun model, meanwhile, was an all-round machine that balanced offense and defense. It suited Star Soul Masters with balanced attributes, steady nerves, and strong willpower. Its 5 Thunder shield gun could freely switch between autocannon mode and shotgun mode. And if the squad needed suppressive combat or defensive counterfire, it could also be paired with a honeycomb cannon, enter beast mode, and transform into a mobile firepower bunker for the whole team. The airstrike type Wei Yuan, however, was something truly era-defining. From this point on, even mortal rank Star Soul Masters who could precisely control soul power finally had a machine that could take them into aerial warfare. Its aerial combat backpack could act as heavy armor on the ground, blocking incoming ranged fire, and once transformed, it could use soul power propulsion to glide through the air at high speed, turning its pilot into a razor-sharp dagger built for breaking through enemy lines and striking behind them. Hearing that, everyone present became even more desperate to get their hands on a new unit of their own. The excitement in the hall was so intense, it almost drowned Youngki on the stage. Youngki quickly reminded them that he had only managed to get these machines after begging his big brother forever, and there were only 2 of each model, so everyone had to pick according to their own abilities. Chu Heng was the first to jump in, loudly declaring that nobody was allowed to fight him for the heavy armor model because he was going to become the kind of real man who stood like a wall in heavy armor with a weapon in hand. Lin Chen immediately reserved a slot for the airstrike model, saying he wanted to become a hawk and soar through the sky, enjoying speed and cutting winds. Zhao Lingxi, on the other hand, did not compete with them for those. Since she had some alchemy experience and was confident in her soul power conversion and control, she chose the artillery model so she could support everyone from range. Su Xiaohe, who was mainly responsible for support and logistics, chose the flying sword model to help the team with mobility and coordination. But when it came to the last remaining airstrike slot, Tao Zhou and Qin Xingyao immediately started arguing again. The moment Tao Zhou said he also wanted to know what it felt like to fly, the overbearing and unreasonable Qin Xingyao directly used force to pressure him into choosing the artillery model instead, even claiming that with such an overly cautious personality, he had no right to compete with her for the airstrike slot. At that point, Youngki hurriedly stepped in and told the 2 of them to stop arguing. None of this was final yet anyway. They would only know the real result after testing, so he told the class rep and Lingxi to go help him distribute the war supplies first. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he handed the talismans and pills in his hands directly over to the 2 girls. Sun Mo found that deeply surprising. He had never expected Song Yongxiang to hand over treasures like this so casually, without asking for anything in return. And that only made him even more curious about just how deep Song Yongxiang's true foundation really ran. Meanwhile, while the class rep and Lingzi were distributing supplies, Song Yongki told everyone that they should also come up with a loud and impressive name for their squad. Chu Heng immediately threw out something ridiculous like the Invincible Alliance squad of the Chu, Lu, Tao, and Qin family descendants. Lin Chen instantly complained that the name was way too long and said that since they were all bad students anyway, they should just call themselves the Bad Student Squad. The moment that name came out, Miss Chen strongly rejected it on the spot. While smacking Lin Chen again, she even cursed that the whole Lin family might as well be bad students. Qin Xingyao also had a problem with Chu Heng's suggestion, because in her eyes, as a first-tier family, the Qin name absolutely had to come first. Tao Zhou then seriously began analyzing the matter, saying that according to Tiandu Nation's normal organization, a standard squad usually consisted of 5 people including 1 squad leader, while special operations units like the Secret Investigation Division or the Embroidered Guard Bureau typically used 4-person squads. So if they counted Uncle Song 2, their total headcount already exceeded a standard squad. But at the same time, they were still far short of what would qualify as a full platoon-sized unit. In other words, he genuinely could not figure out what kind of formation their group was supposed to count as. Chu Heng immediately told him to stop obsessing over such pointless details, since their team did not belong to the regular Tiandu military system in the first place. As for Youngki, the one who had started this whole naming discussion, he actually wanted to offer an opinion too, but his academic performance in the humanities was so hopeless that when it came time to think of a name on the spot, his brain simply came up blank. As for the other girls, who had not really formed strong opinions and were mostly just following him into action, they were even worse. They looked at each other for ages and still could not come up with anything useful. In the end, Youngki could only helplessly tell this bunch of underachievers to keep walking and keep thinking of a name on the way. As a result, one ridiculous suggestion after another came out, including things like the Young and Handsome Boys and Beautiful Girls Squad, to the point that even Sun Mo started wondering whether this whole group was actually reliable at all. At the same time, Song Yongxiang and Tamao were sprinting through the air and soon reached the intersection along Yong'an City's southeastern main avenue, one of the most chaotic battle zones in the city. Song Yongxiang even teased her on the way, asking whether breaking through to heaven rank felt as good as she had imagined. Tamao did not even try to hide her excitement. She said it felt insanely good. Before meeting Song Yongxiang, she had never even dared imagine that one day she would be able to soar through the sky like a bird. If she ever got the chance to return to her tribe, she was definitely going to show off in front of the chief big sister and the others. But while she was still busy reveling in her newfound strength, Song Yongxiang had already sensed a huge flock of Baifang-type beasts rushing straight toward them. Tamao, whose perception was nowhere near Song Yongxiang's level, had not noticed a thing. If he had not warned her in time, the two of them would have flown headfirst straight into the beast swarm. In response, Song Yongxiang directly called out the newly obtained Star Soul General UFA from the Star-Lord system to test it out, and at the same time, let Timao try switching to a different mount. As a bolt of heavenly thunder suddenly exploded across the sky, the star-colored UFA descended onto the battlefield. And just like that, this also became Song Yongxiang's first real battle since stepping into heaven rank. Since that was the case, then he might as well use this new toy to fire the first shot of humanity's counterattack in this war. Meanwhile, the Tao family members who had earlier abandoned their position and withdrawn were still being relentlessly chased by the heaven rank beast. But after retreating again and again, they suddenly realized they had nowhere left to fall back. Behind them were large numbers of civilians who still had not made it into the safe zone, leaving them no choice but to grit their teeth and form up on the spot for a defensive stand. The two deputies by Tao Lin's side were equally out of ideas, so they immediately asked the family head what they should do next. If they had to fight, then they were ready to take the brothers and brawl it out with those damn beasts to the bitter end. In response, Tao Lin told all his men in a firm, ringing voice that they were not retreating anymore. More than 70% of Yong'an City's residents were clients of the Tao family bank. That meant they had to uphold the Tao family's ancestral code and place every single client's life and property above all else. Under no circumstances could they let the beast break through and slaughter their own people. After saying that, he forced down the fear in his heart and ordered everyone to stop retreating and form ranks for battle. The Dao family fighters showed just as much grit. They swiftly set up their attack formation and opened fire in waves, focusing on suppressing the low-rank beasts that had been chasing them non-stop. Tao Lin then issued another order, telling his two deputies to lead the men in meeting the enemy with a flanking horn formation. Not a single beast was to be allowed past the line. As for him, he would personally step out to hold off the heaven-ranked beast and buy time for everyone else. Immediately after that, his men spread out in perfect coordination to both sides of the street, while the two deputies charged first and absorbed the opening impact of the beast horde for the brothers behind them. Tao Lin, meanwhile, seized the moment, dual-wielded soul power-light crossbows, and rushed straight toward the low-rank beasts, launching a direct feint. But in the next instant, he moved faster than the enemy expected. The moment he pulled the beast's aggro, he used a heaven rank air step to disengage and circle around to the side and rear of the heaven rank beast, preparing a surprise strike. Although that ambush successfully pinned down the heaven rank beast's movements, the flaw in his unit's insufficient output quickly became obvious. He worked like mad for a while and still failed to deal even a sliver of meaningful damage. Left with no other option, Tao Lin could only grit his teeth and try physical attacks instead, hoping brute force might somehow break through the defense. But even after putting his whole body into a savage kick, all he managed to do was press the beast's blocking arms upward over its head. He still could not break its guard. The Kaiang-Chi-type beast, thoroughly enraged by him now, immediately let its savage instincts explode. With a violent burst of strength from both arms, it hurled Tao Lin flying away. At that point, Tao Lin was clearly getting carried away. After landing and steadying himself, he had almost completely forgotten that his original job was only to stall the beast. In the next second, he launched himself forward in a slide, going straight for the enemy's lower body and trying to force out at least some effective damage at point-blank range. By the time Tao Lin realized that his latest attack still had done absolutely nothing, it was already too late. In the next instant, the beast's arm, sharp as a giant blade, tore through his unit with terrifying ease. If that machine had not been constructed from heaven-rank soul power, that single strike alone would have been enough to kill him on the spot. And after tasting success, the Kang-Chi-type beast followed up with a brutal hook punch and blasted him flying once again. The moment they saw that, every Tao family disciple instantly tensed up, and many of them even lost focus in the middle of battle as they worried over their family head's condition. Fortunately, the situation was quickly steadied again when Tao Lin forcefully climbed back out from the rubble, but his real condition was anything but good. Even though he had already stepped into early stage heaven rank, the strength of the Kimchi-type beast before him still far exceeded everything he had expected. At this point, the only thing he could do was find some way to stall a little longer and wait for Song residents' reinforcements to arrive. And now that he was already seriously wounded, the only method he could think of was long-range harassment. So he endured the pain and kept forcing himself to use ranged attacks in an effort to keep the heaven rank beast's attention locked onto him. But this time, that method no longer worked. The heaven rank beast had already figured out that Tao Lin's attacks could not actually injure it. So now, it did not even bother defending anymore. It simply tanked his attacks head-on and focused entirely on dragging him out. Even though Tao Lin pushed his speed to the absolute limit, the beast still managed to catch a tiny opening he had no way of avoiding. In the next instant, the moment his movement was pinned down, he was riddled on the spot by the beast's dense barrage attack until his body looked like a sieve. Worse still, before he had even hit the ground, the beast had already begun charging a second wave of energy barrages, clearly intending to finish him off. At that point, Tao Lin, already drowning in despair, could only bitterly lament his own weakness. Then he slammed hard into the ground and waited for death to arrive. The heaven-rank beast clearly had no intention of giving him even the slightest chance to recover. The instant he hit the ground, it unleashed another flood of barrage fire at him, trying to finish the kill for good. Seeing this, the Dao family disciples immediately panicked. The two deputies instantly ordered all the brothers to charge together. No matter the cost, they had to rush over and protect their family head. However, in the middle of that chaos, Tao Lin, who should have been on the verge of death, suddenly spoke from within the smoke, ordering his men not to break formation and forcing himself to tell them that he was still alive. The moment the deputy heard that, shock flooded his face. He simply could not understand how his family head had survived that kind of attack. But as the smoke slowly cleared, the answer was quickly revealed. Tao Lin, having narrowly escaped death, desperately wanted to thank the person who had saved him. But the problem was that he still had no idea who that savior actually was. Aga, being Aga, immediately seized the moment to put on a show in front of the Dao family head. He only said that he was a Song resident shadow guard sent by young Master Yang Jiang to provide support, and then deliberately stopped there, hiding the rest of his identity. His sudden appearance only provoked the heaven-rank beast even further. Just as the beast's feral nature surged and it moved to attack the two human fighters in front of it, a soul power beam with clearly enhanced firepower suddenly slammed into it and interrupted the motion. Even Ajin, who was lying in ambush on top of the building, was shocked by that result, because he had not expected the heaven-rank beast's hide to be so absurdly tough that even that attack could not punch through it. The enraged Kong Chi-type beast immediately turned and launched a counterattack toward his position. That forced Ajin to instantly abandon his original firing posture and switch entirely to evasive maneuvers. In response, Aga immediately told Ajin to go help the Dao family fighters clean up the lesser beasts. As for the big one in front of them, he would handle it himself. Since Ajin truly did not have any reliable way to break that thing's defense, he could only accept the arrangement. So he lowered the heavy light crossbow in his hands, and instead released all 8 of his sensing flying swords, sending them out to support the Dao family fighters still locked in brutal combat with the low-rank beasts. For those Tao family disciples who had been struggling in a vicious stalemate, the arrival of Song residents' reinforcements finally gave them a moment to breathe, and the sight before them, flying swords remotely shredding beasts in mid-combat, hit them with a kind of shock they had never experienced before. So stunned were they, that all they could do was blurt out clumsy praise about what true experts and true machines were supposed to look like. Meanwhile, while Ajin moved to reinforce the rear defense line, Aga's duel with the heaven-rank beast was unfolding at the exact same time. In their very first clash, Aga did not fall behind in the slightest. This shield gun Wei Yuan unit, refined with better output and soul power efficiency, fit his hands so perfectly that it felt like it had been built for him alone. In response, the heaven-rank beast immediately tried to exploit its size advantage, circling upward to get around the frontal defense of the shield gun and unleash a barrage from above. But Aga had been ready for that. He seized the timing in an instant and swung the 5 Thunder shield gun in his other hand straight toward the beast's gaping maw, then answered blow for blow with shotgun mode, slamming the pain that the Dao family head had suffered right back into its face. Watching that, the heavily wounded Tao Lin was too stunned by the bottomless depth of Song residents' strength to even speak. He had never imagined that Song residents not only possessed a number of heaven-rank experts that surpassed everyone else, but also wielded such tyrannical skill in forging battle units. At the same time, the Chen and Chu families, who were resisting the beast horde together on latitude 3rd Street, also successfully wiped out the invading monsters in their sector. In response, Qinxian immediately ordered everyone to remain on full alert and not let their guard down for even a moment. while also telling the wounded to fall back, recover, and use that gap to contact Song residents so the logistics team could come collect the battlefield resources. At that point, Chen Xian could not help but sincerely thank the Chu family for their full support. Chu Dasheng, fiery as ever, told old Chen not to be so formal and bluntly admitted that after this battle, he had completely fallen in love with fighting side by side with him. The whole slaughter had felt unbelievably satisfying. However, they had barely exchanged a few more words, and the wounded had not even fully withdrawn yet, when a massive flock of Bifang-type beasts came flying in from the sky again, forcing them right back into battle. At that, Chen Xian and Chu Dasheng stopped wasting words and immediately gave the same order. Hold the ground where they stood and fire into the sky. And once that flock of Bifang-type beasts spotted the gathered human fighters below, they instantly dived as one and launched another wave of attacks. But even though the Qin and Chu families fired desperately into the air with everything they had, very few of those attacks were actually able to hit the Bifang-type beast diving at them at full speed. At that, both Chen Xian and Chu Dasheng felt a deep sense of frustration. Their families had always focused almost entirely on close-quarters combat, and only now, in a situation like this, did the weakness of their anti-air capability get exposed so brutally. But at that critical moment, the long-range battle technique of the Star Soul General Yu Fei, Shattering Arrow, myriad arrows returned to oblivion, descended onto the battlefield in time, and pulled the Chen and Chu families out of that crisis. The people of both families were so stunned by the scene that they actually stopped firing and simply looked up to take in that overwhelming spectacle. Even rough men like Chen Xian and Chu Dasheng were left speechless for a moment. They had heard earlier that Song residence was dispatching support all over the city, but they had never imagined that this so-called reinforcement would arrive in such a savage and overpowering way. When Song Yongxiang rode UFA into latitude 3rd Street to reinforce the Qin and Chu families, everyone present was left in awe of the Origin Star Soul General's terrifying combat power. Although the soul power intensity of the reinforcements before them only seemed to be at heaven rank, the oppressive aura radiating from the machine itself was already enough to rival a true Saint rank powerhouse. But from Song Yongxiang's own point of view, this support wave had been a brutal loss. If time had not been so tight and the task so urgent, he never would have used a battle technique to blow all those Bifang-type beasts to pieces in one shot and end up with not even a single beast core to recover. It was a painful loss no matter how he looked at it. Still, if that price bought the survival of the Qin and Chu families, then it was one he could accept. And on top of that, he could clearly feel that the moment he arrived on the front line, the morale of their side's fighters surged to a level it had never reached before. However, just as Song Yongxiang was about to immediately move to the next area to provide support, a huge number of Bifang-type beasts suddenly began swarming together, almost as if they had smelled the presence of an Origin Star Soul General, and rushed straight toward him in force. Worse still, these notoriously cunning beasts had no intention of giving him any chance to close the distance. From far away, they all opened their maws and began charging energy beams, planning to blast him out of the sky from range. In response, Song Yongxiang immediately told Tamao to focus up and get ready to evade at any moment, because the next few minutes were about to get very exciting. But after hearing that, Tamao only looked more eager, practically unable to wait to show off the results of her recent training. So the instant the beast's energy beams fired all at once, she activated heaven rank air step on her own and carried Song Yongxiang straight through the net of fire. And when that air step was combined with the Demonkin's almost instinctive level of terrifying reflexes, it became a perfect match. Song Yongxiang barely even needed to direct her at all. By her own skill alone, she was able to weave freely through the dense barrage of enemy fire. And if even his mount was showing off like this, then as the master, Song Yongxiang obviously could not stay quiet either. With a single lift of his hand, he unleashed a 6-shot mounted volley, cleanly sniping 6 Bifang-type beasts out of the sky. On the ground, the disciples of the Qin and Chu families were completely stunned as they watched beast corpses continue dropping from the sky. What shook them even more was that every single one of those dead beasts turned out to be headless, which meant that the expert above them had struck each beast in the head with absolute precision, deliberately leaving the rest of the corpse intact so that the beast core resources inside could still be recovered afterward. At that, even Chu Dasheng was left numb with shock. He could not begin to imagine how that expert had managed to land such perfect headshots from so far away while moving through such a chaotic battlefield at that speed. That level of power was simply not in the same dimension as theirs. However, just as the Qin and Chu families were still rejoicing over the fact that they had received support from such a powerhouse, those Bifang-type beasts that had gathered to surround the Origin Star Soul General casually dumped another large wave of beasts onto their position, clearly deciding to make trouble for them too. That immediately scared the Qin and Chu families badly, and they could only hurriedly call their subordinates back into formation to meet the enemy again. But after the coordination they had built in the last battle, the two families already had a solid understanding of who should attack and who should defend. So the Chu family disciples who were responsible for defense did not hesitate at all and immediately formed a shield wall across the street, creating space for the saber and sword fighters behind them to launch counterattacks. At the same time, Song Yongshang also quickly noticed the shift on the ground battlefield. In response, he directly ordered Tamao to take the Yulong horse down on her own and reinforce the Qin and Chu families. As for the Baifeng-type beasts in the sky, he would deal with them by himself. The moment she received that order, Tamao, who still had not had enough fun, immediately got excited and dove downward, fully ready to go on another rampage. And just as Song Yongshang had expected, the Qin and Chu families on the ground soon got dragged into brutal close-range combat because they simply lacked the kind of wide-area ranged firepower needed to stop the tide. At any moment, they could be swallowed whole by the beast horde. Seeing that, Qin Xian immediately ordered everyone to switch to melee gear and go all in against the beasts, while leaving the sky to that powerhouse above them. Beside him, Chu Dasheng also seized the chance to hype everyone up, shouting for them to pour every ounce of strength they had into the fight and not embarrass themselves in front of that expert. In response, the younger fighters of both families gritted their teeth and hardened their resolve. Even though they were at an absolute disadvantage in numbers, they refused to take a single step back. They were determined to live and die with the ground beneath their feet. But just as the line was reaching the brink of collapse, Timao, riding the Yulong horse alone, arrived as reinforcement. She did not hesitate for even a second and plunged straight into the rear of the beast horde, cutting off their flow and instantly easing the pressure on the front line. And with heaven-rank combat power in hand, the moment she entered the enemy formation, she turned into a full-blown killing machine. As a demonkin warrior woman, she had already fought through countless battles before, and now, with a star soul beast that suited her this well, she moved like a fish in water. And after getting tired of pure physical attacks, she simply turned her head and spat out a massive wave of soul power flames, burning every low-rank beast that dared rush toward her. The horrifying sight stunned everyone present. Qin Xian, who knew nothing about her true nature, could not help blurting out that he had never seen a star soul beast capable of fighting this independently, and that its intelligence level was so high, it looked as though someone was directly controlling it. Chu Dasheng, meanwhile, felt a bitter sting of defeat. He had never imagined that he and Qin Xian, both early-stage heaven-rank old men, would look this pitiful next to a true heaven-rank powerhouse. The two of them put together were not even as useful as the other side's horse. Timao, still not satisfied after all that killing, swept clean through an entire street of low-rank beasts on her own, and even walked up afterward to finish off the ones that had not fully died yet, making sure none of them would be left behind as a threat. Feeling smug, she could not help marveling at how amazing this invincible feeling was. She truly had never expected that after young master helped open her second star soul vein, she would become this strong. But that self-satisfied performance was immediately met with criticism from Song Yongxiang. This little spendthrift had clearly forgotten every instruction he had given her. In the middle of all that wild slaughter, she had shattered a huge number of beast cores, turning it into a massive waste. Fearing that young master might not bring her out next time, Timao could only scratch her head awkwardly and apologize, hurriedly promising that she would absolutely remember it next time. She had simply gotten too carried away with the killing and forgotten in the moment. Although Song Yongshang's heart was practically bleeding from the losses, he did not keep scolding her. Instead, while continuing to fight, he began shifting his position through the air, trying to lure the Baifeng-type beasts farther away from latitude 3rd Street so that they would stop dropping new beast waves down onto the defense line. However, just after he had led that flock of Baifeng-type beasts several miles toward the southern side of Yang'an City, a tremendously powerful energy beam suddenly appeared right in front of him without warning. Luckily, Song Yongshang's own reaction speed was monstrous enough that, in the split second before the attack hit, he twisted his body to the absolute limit and barely slipped past it by borrowing the outward force of the beam's explosive spread. In response, Song Yongshang immediately locked all of his attention onto the direction the attack had come from. Very soon, a Kongqi-type beast with smoke still curling from its mouth entered his sight, and from that one energy beam alone, Song Yongshang had already judged that this beast's strength had reached heaven rank peak. So he instantly decided to use this heaven rank beast as a test subject. After all, there were still plenty of weapons and configurations on the Star Soul General Yu Fei that he had not truly field tested yet. So he first retracted the Divine Arm Bow behind his back, and that Divine Arm Bow, now updated with the latest Star Web data, could transform into a pair of heavy flight wings that would give Yu Fei's aerial mobility a qualitative leap. As for the Liquan Spear and the Zhanlu Sword that came with it, those were also among Song Yongshang's favorite weapons. Even though his long-range combat was already terrifying, close-range combat was just as much his playground. And after breaking into Heaven rank, he had also successfully unlocked Yu-Fei's Furious Crown mode. So with such a rare opportunity in front of him, he naturally wanted to use this Heaven rank peak Chongqi type beast to test just how much that mode could boost his combat power. That way, when the time came to design custom units for the future Saints and Heaven ranks under his side, he would have a much clearer idea of the upper limits. As the final limiter inside the machine was released, all of the soul power that had been leaking outward instantly condensed into a blood-red mist-like coating over the body of the unit. At the same time, a violent restlessness surged inside Song Yongxiang, pushing his soul power output upward until it nearly touched late-stage Heaven rank and even brushed the threshold of half-step peak. The machine's output also continued climbing, to the point that the overflowing soul power ignited into a blazing aura cloak that wrapped itself over every part of the unit. Once everything finally stabilized, the star-colored Yu-Fei's Furious Crown mode was fully activated. At that point, even against a Heaven rank peak opponent, Song Yongxiang no longer needed to rely on opportunistic tricks the way he had before. But when the people on the ground saw that transformation, none of them felt relieved in the slightest. The image of that Star Soul General now looked too much like a vengeful spirit returned from the underworld, and it filled them with pure dread instead. At the same time, the reckless little troublemaker Song Yunhua had already snuck with Gongsun Zhanzhan to Yong'an Avenue in the southern district of Yong'an City, preparing to ambush a lone Huodo-type beast. But just before they were about to make a move, Gongsun Zhanzhan nervously asked Miss Yunhua in a low voice whether they were really going to do this. In response, Song Yunhua shoved the Star Soul General talisman into Xiaozhan's hands and stated as if it were the most obvious thing in the world that since Xiaozhan was an Earth rank expert, there was nothing to be scared of, and they would take down that single lone beast in no time. But Xiaozhan was still deeply worried, because she had absolutely no real combat experience against beasts. In response, Yunhua brushed it off and said that if she did not dare fight, then she should stop holding her back, and that in the worst case, she would just handle it herself. What neither of them knew was that ever since they had secretly slipped out from the rear courtyard of the Song residence, they had already been picked up by Asan and her junior sister, who had been lurking near the Song residence waiting for an opportunity. At that, Xiao Tiao immediately asked her senior sister whether they should seize this chance and take back the target they had originally been after. But after a brief moment of thought, Asan ordered her junior sister to stay put, maintain distance, and continue observing first. They would see what happened next before deciding whether to intervene. At the same time that the beast tide erupted in Yong'an City, the Taiyuan intelligence station, which had earlier suffered another surprise strike from the ensemble squad, used the chaos to relocate and moved into an abandoned mine north of Yong'an City. Once the equipment was more or less set up, the intelligence officer Dong Si immediately asked one of the technicians under her about the situation and how much longer it would take before they could reconnect with headquarters. In response, the technician could only answer helplessly that the problem was honestly beyond what she could fix anytime soon. The dedicated relay station used for directional communication between the team and headquarters had been heavily damaged during the earlier attack by that mysterious squad, so restoring normal contact was not something they could do quickly. The moment Dong Si heard that, her face darkened. At a moment like this, losing contact with headquarters was about as serious as it could get. What made it even worse was that, even now, she still could not understand why that mysterious squad seemed determined to keep targeting them. 2 attacks in such a short time already had her worrying whether a third might come next. But at this point, worrying about a problem that was already outside her ability to control would not solve anything. So all she could do was turn around and order Intelligence Group 2 to report the latest situation inside Yong'an City. The leader of Intelligence Group 2 immediately reported that, although Yong'an City's walls had not yet been directly breached by the beast tide, huge numbers of beasts had already been airdropped into the city. In other words, the interior situation had already descended into complete chaos. Based on the current state of things, she judged that the southbound diversion interdiction operation being handled by Action Group S3 could basically already be declared a failure. The Yu Zongxing squad listening nearby clearly did not like hearing that. The entire squad instantly put on airs and used silence itself to show that they did not care in the slightest whether that mission had succeeded or failed. In their eyes, if their squad had not been stationed here, everyone in this intelligence post would have already been wiped out by that mysterious team. Realizing she had stepped on the wrong nerve, the Group 2 leader immediately changed the subject, trying to avoid those looks of open disdain. She then explained further to team leader Dong Si that there were actually 2 main reasons why Yong'an City still had not fallen. First, in less than 10 minutes after the beast tide erupted, the city's defenders had already reacted with incredible speed. Not only had the City Lord Manor taken the lead in organizing the City Guard Army and the Mecha Martial Preparatory Academy to defend the walls, but the major families and even the civilian forces inside the city had also somehow been twisted into a single coordinated force, conducting street battles under what looked like a unified command to intercept the beasts that had been dropped into the city. At the same time, large numbers of civilians were being evacuated toward the safe zones in an orderly fashion. Because of that, she believed there was very likely a true mastermind hidden behind the curtain. The coordination displayed by all the forces inside Yong'an City was simply too smooth, too prepared, almost as if it had all been rehearsed beforehand. That report immediately made Dongxi think of the young man from the Song family. According to the pre-battle intelligence they had gathered, the Kong family of the City Lord Manor was competent at best. There was no way they should have been capable of battlefield command this efficient and this sharp. She then moved on and asked about the status of Action Group A8. Another liaison officer quickly reported that the Suonyang squad had sent back information 3 minutes earlier confirming that Gongsun Janjanjan had already left the bounds of the Song residence, and they were now asking whether they should proceed with either an abduction or assassination order. In response, Dongxi immediately ordered the liaison officer to reply that they were to hold position for now. Since the beast tide had already erupted, it likely meant that Milan's southbound diversion plan had already been set in motion successfully. If that was the case, then the window for acting against Gongsun Janjan had already passed, so they were to remain in place and continue observing for the moment. In truth, only Dongxi herself fully understood just how bad the current situation really was. Ever since Yu Yi's infiltration of the Song residence had failed last time, she had lost all contact with Gongsun Janjan. Under the present circumstances, she absolutely could not allow Action Group A8 to either abduct or contact her, because doing so might expose Gongsun Janjan's identity as a Taiyuan intelligence asset. On top of that, the sudden eruption of the beast tide had effectively already declared the southbound diversion interdiction operation, under her leadership, a failure. If Milan's military operation now proceeded smoothly, then when she returned, she would have no explanation to offer the High Priestess. Even trying to dump the blame onto Action Group S3 would not save her. So from this point on, she absolutely had to come up with some way to redeem herself. Right after that, Dongxi called the Yuzhongxing squad over to her side to receive their next set of orders, and the women who had just been indirectly blamed for the failed mission immediately perked up the moment they heard there was new work to do. They walked over with mocking smiles, and their chins held high, carrying themselves like they were silently telling everyone present that, in the end, this mess would still have to be cleaned up by them. The first task Dongxi assigned them was to infiltrate Yong'an City at once and track down the southbound diversion team from the Military Warfare Bureau. Their mission objective was to capture members of that group alive and drag them back for interrogation regarding the beast tide. In response, Yu Yi, the captain of the Yuzhongxing squad, simply said without the slightest hesitation that she was taking the assignment. Dongxi then moved on to the second task. Inside the storage talisman in her hand was a forged identity belonging to an intelligence operative from Milan's Crown Prince faction. While carrying out the first mission, the squad was to use that identity to try to make contact with Gongsun Janjan in person, ensure her safety, and establish a new line of communication. Yu Yi answered just as casually, saying she understood and would do her best to make it happen. However, just as the Yuzhongxing squad was about to turn and leave, Dongxi spoke again and said there was still a third mission to give them, and this one was the most important of all. That made Yu Yi pause and turn back with a hint of confusion, asking what exactly that critical mission was. Dongxi replied in a low voice that the third mission was for them to find a way to identify the hidden mastermind coordinating all the forces inside Yong'an City from behind the scenes. The intelligence division would cooperate with them unconditionally, and if necessary, they were permitted to use whatever means it took. After taking this final assignment, Yu Yi immediately led the Yuzhongxing squad out to begin the mission. But before actually leaving the base, they apparently had a little unfinished business to handle first. Qiyu, who had been wounded earlier in battle, deliberately took point and, without even pretending otherwise, stepped over on purpose and stomped hard on the foot of the Group 2 leader. Then she acted as if she had been tripped by the other woman, and even let herself pitch forward with a grin. In the next instant, her teammate Yuan Ying turned and caught her in perfect sync, then immediately took the opportunity to go on the offensive, demanding to know why the Group 2 leader had tripped her teammate, even going so far as to use Qiyu's status as a wounded fighter to accuse her of possibly betraying the organization. The Group 2 leader, furious on the spot, immediately snapped back that they were obviously picking a fight on purpose, and that it had clearly been the other squad's member who had deliberately stepped on her first. But before she could even finish her sentence, the hand she had just raised was slammed back down by a still-burning cigarette butt, and Deng, who hated talking and preferred to settle things directly with force, did not indulge her for even a second. She openly took on a posture that challenged the Group 2 leader to fight right then if she had a problem, scaring her into silence on the spot. The women of the Yuzongxing squad were naturally thrilled by the whole thing, while the Group 2 leader, who could do absolutely nothing about them, could only storm off in fury and run to Dong Si for justice. But before she could even start complaining, Team Leader Dong Si cut her off on the spot and told her to drop it right there and stop obsessing over the matter. Right after that, Dong Si ordered the intelligence team to continue tracking the developments in Yong'an City, while also urging the technicians to hurry up with repairs on the specialized equipment and restore contact with headquarters as soon as possible. At the same time, on Yong'an Avenue in the southern district of Yong'an City, Song Yunhua and Gongsun Zhanzhan were still arguing non-stop over whether or not they should ambush that lone beast. But no matter how much Gongsun Zhanzhan tried to talk sense into her, that crazy girl Yunhua simply would not listen. If Xiaozhan had not been clutching her sleeve the whole time, she would have charged in already. In response, Song Yunhua boldly declared that she was a super genius who had already reached Black Rank peak at such a young age, completely forgetting that her cultivation had basically been force-fed upward by her big brother's pills. Then she told the timid Xiaozhan to just stay back and watch. With her own cultivation plus a maid-type Wei Yuan unit, taking down a low-rank beast would be child's play. And since she had long been unable to suppress her urge to fight, the moment she finished constructing her unit, she raised her shield, shouted at the top of her lungs, and charged straight in, having already forgotten all about the original idea of a stealth attack. In response, the Huodo-type beast was immediately drawn in by all her yelling, but before it could react at all, Song Yunhua slammed into it with her shield and sent it flying. Even so, this kind of small beast was still extremely agile. Driven by pure instinct, it spun several times in midair to shed the force and landed back on the ground in a stable stance. At that point, even foolish little Song Yunhua finally put away her playful attitude and started taking the standoff seriously. She then tried to provoke the beast into making the first move, while she herself assumed the opening stance of the sword and shield style personally taught to her by her big brother, ready to counter from defense. The Huodo-type beast also did not disappoint her and lunged in on its own. In response, Song Yunhua immediately copied the move her big brother had taught her and smashed forward with one hard shield strike, knocking the beast flat to the ground. Then the standard longsword in her right hand came down without hesitation, cleanly chopping off the beast's head in one stroke, without even the slightest trace of fear. And yet, she still felt weirdly disappointed, because she had never expected a beast like this to be so weak. She had originally planned to trade at least 300 rounds with it. Still, no matter what, this was the victory of her very first real battle, so she instantly turned around in excitement, wanting to share the joy with Xiaozhan. But she had not even been happy for a full minute before Xiaozhan sensed that there were more beasts behind her, and immediately screamed for her to watch her back and stop getting careless. By the time Song Yunhua turned around to look, however, it was already too late. A huge number of beasts, drawn in by the commotion, had already poured in and completely filled the once empty street. In response, Song Yunhua immediately yelled at Xiaozhan to stop standing there like an idiot and hurry over to help in the fight. And Gongsun Zhanzhan, who had absolutely no real combat experience whatsoever, could only grit her teeth and begin her Star Soul construct. Just like that, the two little foodies could only brace themselves on the spot and face off against the beast pack that had come rushing over. The moment Song Yunhua realized she finally had backup, her confidence shot through the roof. She instantly started ordering Xiaozhan to hold the right side for her. In response, Xiaozhan could only force herself to agree, though whether she could actually hold it was a completely different matter. And just as expected, the instant the two sides actually clashed, their already shaky formation completely fell apart on the spot. Surrounded and attacked by 3 Huodo-type beasts at once, Song Yunhua could only retreat in embarrassment, trying to figure out a plan while falling back. After all, in a situation where she was completely outnumbered, there was no way she could deal with so many enemies alone. As for Gongsun Zhanzhan's side, things looked even worse. The beasts had not even truly exerted themselves yet, and she was already flustered and scrambling. In response, she could only force herself to focus harder and attempt to strike back with her sword, but the slashes she threw out still failed to achieve any meaningful effect. And there was only one consequence to being that overly focused. By the time she finally realized something was wrong, the sharp claw of a Taodi-type beast was already practically pressed against her face. But right at that critical moment, the Star Soul General Lu Bu suddenly appeared and severed the beast's arm with a single slash, saving her life on the spot. Immediately after, that Taodi-type beast, which had been on the verge of a successful sneak attack, was kicked flying with a brutal blow, instantly resolving the lethal crisis before her. Naturally, Gongsun Zhanzhan desperately wanted to know who exactly had stepped in to save her at that crucial moment so that she could thank them face to face. Although this Star Soul General had indeed appeared in the records, the equipment setup and colors right in front of them clearly did not match the data. Because of that, neither she nor Song Yunhua dared to easily confirm the newcomer's true identity. As for Asan, who who had been hiding in the dark and observing the situation all along, the real reason she suddenly chose to step in and help them was actually because the sight of this foodie duo tangled in combat with the beasts had awakened a precious memory from her past. Back then, when Asan was still number 10 participating in the Star Soul Descent host trial, she and 3 other competitors had been tossed directly into a secret realm chamber crawling with beasts by their instructor, left entirely to their own devices to figure out how to walk out alive. And not long after entering, the few of them had quickly been surrounded by a massive horde of Huodo-type beasts. If they wanted to survive, they had to find a way to break out as fast as possible. Faced with that, Asan, who was still called number 10 back then, immediately proposed that they join forces and fight their way out together. However, that proposal was instantly rejected by number 22 on the spot. The other girl even coldly interrogated her, asking if her brain had been broken by the beast for her to say something like that. After all, inside this trial realm, ultimately only one person could become the host of the Origin Star Soul General and receive a name personally bestowed by the High Priestess. Yet Asan remained exceptionally calm in response. She stated that she naturally knew those rules. Even though everyone was indeed competitors against each other, in the current situation, if they did not cooperate, none of them could even dream of finding a way to live. At that, the relatively weaker number 34 immediately declared that she was willing to cooperate with number 10. Furthermore, she knew that, aside from their room, many other competitors were also locked in other rooms. But at this very moment, the only thing she wanted was just to keep surviving. She did not want to just die here like this. But what truly took them by surprise was that number 8, who usually always kept to herself, actually nodded in agreement right then, willing to join hands with them to break out. That unexpected turn instead brought a look of obvious astonishment to the face of number 22, who had been the most fiercely opposed to teaming up from the start. In the end, she had no choice but to reluctantly agree to fight alongside the 3 of them for the time being. Even so, the highly arrogant girl still could not resist leaving behind harsh words, declaring that once they reached the final stage, all of them would still lose to her, number 22, and that she would definitely win that name and walk openly under the sunlight from then on. Immediately after, the 4 of them began their Star Soul constructs at the same time, preparing to join forces and fight to the death against the beast horde in front of them. However, having been instilled from a young age with the idea that they must fight alone and advance alone, the moment the battle started, they instinctively fought their own individual battles, with absolutely no coordination between them to speak of. Aside from number 10 and number 34, who were at least attempting to break through in the same direction, number 8 and number 22 were almost entirely fighting their own battles, forcefully pushing in opposite directions. As a direct result, number 34, lacking cover from behind, quickly had her opening exploited by the beasts and her arm bitten. Number 22, who was not far away, clearly saw this happen but showed no intention of stepping in to help, and instead mocked her from behind, saying she was just trash and that even if she died, no one would feel sorry for her. But just as number 34's life hung by a thread, number 10 beside her immediately abandoned her original target, turned around abruptly, and knocked the Huodo-type beast away with a single strike. Once the crisis was resolved, number 34 immediately thanked number 10 repeatedly for saving her life. In response, number 10 directly told her to fight back-to-back with her from then on, specifically warning her that those dog-like beasts were incredibly fast and that she absolutely could not afford to be careless in combat. However, relying solely on the strength of just the 2 of them was ultimately too limited. Under the condition of being at an absolute numerical disadvantage, their resistance quickly became increasingly strenuous. By the time the 2 of them began to feel overwhelmed, the Huodo-type beasts immediately adjusted their tactics, bypassing the frontal engagement entirely to leap over the more weakly defended number 34 from above and launch a sneak attack. Yet at that critical moment, number 8, who had previously broken away from the collaboration, suddenly returned as if she had a change of heart, proactively blocking this wave of attacks for them. Both number 10 and number 34 appeared extremely surprised by this, while number 8 silently took a position at their flank, forming a temporary 3-person battle formation with them. Although the final result of that trial still ended with number 10 acquiring the name Asan and becoming the host of the Star Soul General Lu Bu. This experience had been deeply branded into Asan's memory. It was precisely because of this that she could not help but intervene to save those 2 girls behind her when she saw them struggling in a bitter fight against the beast just now. At the same time, Xiao Tiao, who had just witnessed her senior sister Asan suddenly take action with her own eyes, was completely dumbfounded. At a total loss for what to do, she could only repeatedly contact her senior sister via the communicator, questioning why she had suddenly acted just now. Asan, having snapped back to reality and realizing she had broken the rules, immediately accepted her junior sister's call request. In response, she could only explain to her junior sister that seeing the girls fighting the beast from behind had suddenly reminded her of some things from the past, and by the time she came to her senses, her body had already instinctively taken action. Therefore, this matter was entirely her responsibility, and she was sorry for it. However, from Asan's perspective, this was ultimately not some earth-shattering issue. Because she had already noticed that the little girl seemed to have a close relationship with Song Yongxiang, so this time, she considered it conveniently repaying the favor of the pills he had sent to save her master. Her junior sister Xiao Tiao then immediately pressed her on what to do next, asking if they should just make the best of a mistake and take this opportunity to directly abduct Gongsun Zhanjian. To this, Asan replied that they would talk about that after she first cleaned up the troublesome beasts in front of them. However, Xiao Tiao immediately reminded her that without explicit orders from above, they were absolutely not allowed to take action against the beasts on their own. Yet Asan did not take Taiyuan's set of mission rules to heart at all. Even after being reminded by her junior sister, she still went her own way, piloting the Star Soul General Lu Bu right at the very front line of the battle. At the same time, Gongsun Zhanjian, who had just been saved by Asan, could not help asking Song Yunhua whether the origin Star Soul General in front of them was the Star Soul General Lu Bu recorded in the files. The moment Song Yunhua heard the name Lu Bu, she immediately thought back to the banquet where Brother Yongxiang had piloted that very Star Soul General and one-shot Brother Yonrui. Because of that, she instinctively mistook the person in front of her for her beloved big brother. But she quickly realized that this was not her brother Yongxiang after all, because she could clearly sense that the other person's soul power intensity was far weaker than her brother's. So she directly asked the seemingly weaker Earth rank expert in front of her whether Brother Yongxiang had sent him here specifically to protect her. Asan had no idea how to explain any of this, so she could only stay silent. Gongsun Zhanjian, on the other hand, became confused and asked why Yunhua could tell that the other person was only Earth rank. Song Yunhua's answer was simple. The other person's soul power fluctuation was about the same as Xiao Zhan's, so there was no need to guess. However, while they were still talking about this, the beasts had already decided to take advantage of their distraction and launch a second wave of attacks, only for Asan to resolve the whole thing with effortless ease. After that, Asan intended to finish off all the beasts in one go and then vanish on the spot to disengage. But the two little foodies clung to her like shameless little tails, following her all the way forward and treating her like their life raft, refusing to let go. What they did not know was that from the moment Song Yunhua snuck out of the Song residence with Gongsun Zhanjian, the Shadow Guard's special operations team had already received Young Master's orders to secretly protect them, while using Gongsun Zhanjian as bait to lure out the big fish behind the curtain. The instant the Star Soul General Lu Bu appeared, Song Qi immediately noticed suspicious figures hidden atop a nearby building. He then sent the captured footage directly to Tumi, who was in charge of communications, and told her to forward the situation to Young Master Yongxiang at once. Tumi, who had remained in constant contact with Song Yongxiang, immediately reported to him excitedly that, just as Young Master Yongxiang had predicted, they had indeed hooked a big fish. In response, Song Yongxiang immediately asked whether they had already identified the target. Tumi then informed him that the one they had hooked was the real Star Soul General Lu Bu, and asked whether they should close the net immediately and capture the person on the spot. Hearing that, Song Yongxiang was genuinely shaken, because he had never expected Asan to appear here in this way. So he immediately ordered Tumi and the others not to make a move against her yet, and to prioritize Song Yunhua's safety above all else. After that, Song Yongxiang lowered his head again and continued searching through the corpse of the Chongqi-type beast for a heaven-rank rift crystal. Once he had perfectly extracted it from the beast's body, he casually deactivated Yu Fei's Furious Crown mode, preparing to store away this absurdly valuable prize. And in the process, he also began seriously thinking about what exactly Taiyuan's people were doing here in Yong'an City. Because according to the memories of his previous life, Taiyuan was never supposed to be this deeply entangled in the southern wasteland beast tide. That only made him want to understand even more clearly what role Taiyuan was playing in this entire disaster. While Song Yongxiang was dealing with the beasts on the street and thinking through the Taiyuan problem, the soldiers fighting desperately atop the southeastern wall were already close to breaking. The beasts that had made it up through airdrops and wall climbing had nearly crippled all of the city's anti-air defenses. As a result, the scale of the beast airdrops began skyrocketing. Large numbers of Baifang-type beasts were now carrying all kinds of monsters straight over the wall and into the inner districts as if no one could stop them. Seeing this, City Lord Kong Fan, who was directing the battle from the command tower, was nearly frantic. But with no usable troops left in his hands, all he could do was clench his fists and force himself to wait for a chance to turn things around. Fortunately, right at this most critical moment, the squad that had earlier been sent to carry out the wall demolition plan finally returned with good news. At that, everyone stationed at the tower immediately cleared a path and urged the soldier to hurry forward and report the mission's progress to City Lord Kong Fan. The soldier immediately reported to City Lord Kong Fan that they had already followed the Song Residence's latest orders to the letter and finished placing explosives at the 4 designated sections of the wall. At any moment, they could begin the demolition. Kong Fan's first concern was the most important one. He asked whether everyone near the blast zones had already been evacuated. The city guard soldier answered at once that they had checked more than once. The civilians near the designated points and the city guard brothers stationed there had all been withdrawn in batches, and nothing had been overlooked. Still, before the plan was actually carried out, he could not help asking whether they truly intended to destroy the wall. Once they did, the beasts would pour through those breaches straight into the homeland they had sworn to defend. In response, Kong Fan swung his hand decisively and answered without hesitation. He said that if the order came from Song residents, then it certainly had a deeper strategic purpose behind it. He then made it clear that from this point on, no one was allowed to question the order any further. The instructions from Song residents were to be executed without the slightest deviation, because this was a necessary price they had to pay if they wanted to win the war. He also stressed that the explosions had to be carried out strictly at the pre-planned locations and within the designated blast range. There could be no mistakes. Hearing that, the city guard soldier immediately acknowledged the order. He also reported that the city guard team responsible for planting the explosives had already brought in the younger members of the Shin mining family and the Liu construction family to assist. Those people had extensive experience with blasting work, so the operation would be carried out without error. Kong Fan then immediately ordered him to pass the command along and have all sections below the wall begin the demolition simultaneously. At once, the soldier used his communication wristband to relay the order to the supervisory team stationed below. The instant the order was received, the demolition squads at all 4 designated locations pressed their detonators without the slightest hesitation and began carrying out the seemingly insane plan. In the next moment, the explosives that had been planted across the wall detonated in a series of thunderous blasts. The walls began cracking apart inch by inch, and the scale of the destruction was so overwhelming that even the beasts still climbing the outside froze for a split second. As the explosions escalated, the 4 marked sections of the wall began to collapse in rapid succession. The sudden change left the beasts rampaging atop the wall with nowhere to run, and the demolition, precisely designed by professionals, proved devastatingly effective. The collapsed wall not only made it much harder for the later beast waves to continue entering the city, but also crushed a massive number of beasts that had only moments ago still been climbing upward. At the same time, however, the people still fighting desperately throughout the city were all shaken by the scale of the explosion. They had not received any direct update, but the towering plumes of smoke rising from the direction of the walls made it clear to everyone that the situation was turning even uglier. Once the dust and smoke began to clear just a little, Qin Xian was the first to see that a massive breach had been blasted open in the wall. Beside him, Chu Dasheng immediately frowned and guessed that the damage might have been caused by the beasts. But Song Yongxiang, the true force behind this entire decision, understood better than anyone what it meant. The moment he gave that order, the coming battle was destined to grow even more brutal. But for the sake of final victory, he had no other choice. At a moment like this, when he should have remained hidden behind the curtain, he could only do what the great commanders before him had done and step onto the stage himself to shoulder the burden, because only by doing that could he steady the morale of everyone around him. He knew very well that many of his methods were far from the righteous conduct of a heroic ideal, but this place was still his home, and because of that, he had no choice but to protect it. At the same time, not long after Song Yongxiang dismissed his construct, the heads of the Qin and Chu families quickly recognized who he was. The two of them immediately ordered all of their disciples to dismiss their constructs and prepare to pay respects to Lord Yongxiang together. But before Song Yongxiang could even say a word, Qin Xian had already stepped forward first and thanked him solemnly for the timely support. As for Chu Dasheng, whose education was not exactly refined, he could only keep exclaiming that Lord Yongxiang was absolutely incredible. After saying that, Chu Dasheng himself looked a little embarrassed and quickly apologized to Lord Yongxiang, mocking himself as a rough soldier from the ranks who didn't speak well, and asking the Lord not to laugh at him. In response, Song Yongxiang waved it off and told them not to worry about such things. Their performance just now had been far from perfect, but anyone who dared to stand on the front line and fight beasts to the death still deserved to be called a hero. And as the overall commander, he had no intention of being stingy toward people who were truly risking their lives. With that, Song Yongxiang directly pulled out a large amount of recovery-type pills from his storage talisman and told them to distribute them among the soldiers at once so they could restore their fighting strength as quickly as possible. After all, a far more prolonged battle was still waiting ahead. Once the two families received those resources, they immediately began thanking Song Yongxiang one after another. Song Yongxiang then made it clear that no one was allowed to be reluctant about consuming the pills. The beasts were already starting to pour in through the breaches in the wall, so he wanted everyone to recover as fast as possible and be ready to enter the next stage of battle at any moment. Qin Xian, both capable with words and in battle, immediately spoke on behalf of everyone there and swore that they would never fail Lord Yongxiang's expectations. In the coming fight, They would hold the line to the death and never allow the beast to take another step forward. In response, Song Yongxiang also gave them his word that he would never leave them to fight alone. If the situation changed, the Song resident shadow guards would step in at the critical moment. But there was one more thing he had to remind everyone of in advance. In street fighting, formation discipline mattered above all else. They had to prioritize isolated beasts and avoid getting surrounded by the horde in return. At that, Chu Dasheng immediately pounded his chest and promised that they would absolutely fight with everything they had. Tamao, who had returned to Song Yongxiang's side after ending her fight and dismissing her construct, then asked excitedly whether they should head over to the city walls next and kill to their heart's content again. But Song Yongxiang shook his head and said there was no need to rush that yet. The wall front would be handled by the people assigned to it. Their next task was still to remain inside the city, watch the developing situation, and adapt on the spot. However, just before he left and formally entrusted this position to them, he suddenly noticed that everyone standing before him looked incredibly tense and heavy-hearted. Not a single person answered him. So Song Yongxiang immediately raised his arm and shouted that the mountains, rivers, and Tiandu would endure for 10,000 years, and the land their forebears bled for was not something their generation would hand over. He roared that they still had the troops and resolve, so every beast that dared to invade Tiandu would die right here to learn just how terrifying the sons and daughters of Tiandu truly were. The moment those words left his mouth, the oppressive atmosphere hanging over the group was wiped away almost instantly. One after another, everyone raised their arms and roared along with him, and the morale of the entire force surged to a height it had never reached before. Song Yongxiang then made them understand one more thing. This battle was never only about the survival of Yong'an City. If the southern wasteland line fell, the beast would be able to sweep straight through the entire southern region of the eastern continent. This battle left them with only one outcome: victory. Defeat was not an option. Meanwhile, as they watched Song Yongxiang ride away, Chu Dasheng stepped closer to Old Chen and quietly asked whether the Mount Lord Yongxiang had just ridden was the same horse-shaped star-souled beast that had rampaged through the battlefield and displayed such terrifying might earlier. Shen Xian could only sigh and say that Lord Yongxiang truly was a dragon among men. Even the mount beneath him was a rare centaur demonkin, and its cultivation realm was likely beyond what either of them, both early-stage heaven rank, could even compare to. He suspected that even their old brother Kong Zheng probably would not measure up. Hearing that, Chu Dasheng suddenly felt an almost absurd sense of sorrow for Kong Zheng. After scheming and clawing for advantage all his life, that man might still end up not measuring up to someone else's horse. It was both tragic and ridiculous. Meanwhile, after the brief chaos caused by the collapse of the walls, the beasts tied on the ground gradually regained order and began pouring into the city through those breaches in an endless stream. Even so, because the openings themselves were narrow, the actual speed at which the beasts entered the city was not especially fast. In fact, countless beasts were even trampling one another to death in the crush. Watching that unfold from the command tower, Kong Fan was shaken like never before. His soldiers quickly reported that, ever since the breaches had been blasted open, the number of beasts climbing the walls had dropped by roughly 60%. Most of the later beast waves had already turned toward the breaches instead, with almost no intention of continuing to scale the walls. And according to their further observations, even the number of Bifang-type beasts dropping reinforcements into the city from the sky was beginning to decrease sharply. At that, Kong Fan could only admire the Song residents' order from the bottom of his heart. Blockage was inferior to release. That principle had been used to perfection. By exploiting the beast's greed and herd instinct, they had been made to instinctively choose the easier path, which in turn massively reduced the pressure on the defenders spread across the wall. And the one who had thought to exploit that fact was even more terrifying. Someone who understood beast behavior that deeply, truly deserved the title of the hero who had turned the tide during the beast tide at Yuanding City. At the same time, the forward observation post set up by Shadow Guard Group 2 also relayed the latest battlefield update back to headquarters. The number of beasts besieging the wall had dropped by 60%, while the number of beasts being airdropped into the city had fallen by a staggering 80%. Even the Saint rank beasts approaching from behind had been noticeably slowed because of this, although their exact arrival time still required further confirmation. Back at headquarters, the moment Song Yongxiu heard that the plan had taken effect, she immediately realized that the true timing for a counteroffensive had arrived. In response, she issued an immediate order for all 4 of their Saint rank combatants to move out. It was time for the beast to learn what true despair looked like. At that exact moment, she formally assumed full command and rapidly opened communications with the heads of the major families, the City Lord Manor, the Hong Clan Merchant Guild, and every Song resident squad, preparing to launch the next stage of full deployment. Once the communication lines were open, she first declared her identity over the main channel to every combatant still fighting in the city, explaining that she was Song Yongxiang's second elder sister, and from this point on, she was the overall commander of the defensive counteroffensive. Therefore, every tactical arrangement to follow would strictly proceed according to the annihilation strategy Song Yongxiang had already laid out, and she would do everything in her power to execute it properly. She also admitted plainly that sacrifices in this battle were unavoidable. Even so, she would still do everything possible to protect the lives of everyone fighting under her command. And because of that, she asked everyone to place their trust in her and obey every order she was about to issue. In response, the heads of Yong'an City's 4 first-tier families were the first to step forward and declare that they would follow Miss Yangshu's orders unconditionally. Even if it cost them their old lives, they would not complain. Kong Fan, as city lord, immediately followed with his own statement, declaring that the entire City Guard army and all personnel of the Mecha Martial Preparatory Academy were ready to be deployed under Miss Yangshu's command at any moment. Even his father, Kong Zheng, voluntarily stepped forward and asked to be assigned the most difficult mission. Though he was only at mid-stage heaven rank, he was still willing to throw himself into the fire and guarantee success or die trying. After that, all the remaining forces followed suit one after another, declaring that they too were willing to obey Miss Yangshu's unified command. For the future of Yong'an City, there was nothing they would refuse to do. Song Yongxiang, who had remained silently listening the whole time, quickly understood why his second sister had opened with that speech. Truthfully, her handling of the situation was extremely smooth. She understood that being placed in command during a crisis was not, by itself, enough to earn full obedience. So from the very beginning, she raised Song Yongxiang's banner first, using his prestige to suppress all hesitation before smoothly taking command into her own hands. And that, more than anything, revealed the essential difference between her and an older sister-style commander who excelled at stirring morale on the front line and personally leading troops into the charge. Song Yangshu's true strength was never passionate inspiration. It was her ability, in an evenly matched contest, to rapidly evaluate the value of every force and resource on the field, make cold decisions, and use the most precise exchanges and deployments possible to seize initiative and maximize strategic gain. But that was also exactly what worried Song Yongxiang the most. In war, one general's glory was always built atop countless bones, and casualties were unavoidable. Even so, he still hoped his second sister could truly do what she had promised and reduce personnel losses as much as possible. At the same time, after fully winning the recognition of every side, Song Yangshu formally began issuing the next stage of battlefield deployments. And right from the start, she showed absolutely no intention of going easy on the Chen and Chu families. She assigned them, together with the SU family, to hold the 2 major road intersections lying directly along the Beast's main advance route. At the same time, she ordered the 2 heaven-rank family heads to personally go out and bait the enemy, while the rest of their disciples would rely on fixed defensive positions and use a tower defense style of combat to annihilate the beast tied in place. The SU family would stay slightly behind the line and act as a flexible reserve, ready to fill any gap. Yet, surprisingly, after hearing this order, the Chen, Chu, and Su families did not voice a single complaint. Instead, they accepted the commander's arrangements without hesitation. As for the Lu and Tao families, she deployed them to a river intersection already being held by the Zhao family, ordering all 3 houses to lie in wait there and ambush the scattered beasts that were being redirected toward that point. In response, those 3 families also raised no objections whatsoever, and immediately began moving to carry out the next phase. The Eastern Courtyard Maid Squad of the Song family, meanwhile, was ordered to link up with the Jia and Liu family positions. From this point onward, they would form the city's first direct interception line against the beasts, because the southern entrance was one of the unavoidable routes through which the monsters had to pass to enter the city. King Dai accepted that heavy responsibility without the slightest hesitation, and with a heaven-rank expert like her personally anchoring the position, as long as the Jia and Liu families cooperated properly, that route was unlikely to collapse. As for the northern entrance, where the combat pressure was greatest, Song Yangshu directly assigned the Lin family together with Jin, Aga, and the Song resident Shadow Guards to hold that position. Her order was clear. This high-end combat group had to crush the beast tied there, and under no circumstances allow the line to collapse. The Lin family head looked somewhat tense at that assignment, but Jin and Aga did not care in the slightest. They accepted it cleanly on the spot. Jin even had the nerve to joke around, flashing Miss Yangshu a heart sign and telling her to relax a little so she would not ruin how dazzling she looked today. The Shin and Liu families, on the other hand, mostly piloted construction and mining-oriented units, so their direct battlefield strength was limited. Because of that, Song Yangshu ordered them to withdraw from the wall defense and instead move to several marked key positions where they would set up barricades to guide the beast movement routes and total flow. She then assigned Old Master Kong Zheng, who had volunteered on his own, to lead the Kong family disciples in reinforcing the wall defense. At the same time, Considering that the teachers and students of the Mecha Martial Preparatory Academy generally lacked real combat experience and could not sustain prolonged fighting, she additionally deployed the Luo family security teams to the refuge zones to help with defense. That area was the last line protecting civilian lives, and not a single beast could be allowed through. The Sun and Deng families, who had the largest number of disciples, were assigned to mobile operations around the outer perimeter. Their role was to herd the scattered beasts toward the 4 main defensive positions for concentrated extermination, while also cleaning up stragglers that slipped through. Finally, the Hong Clan Merchant Guild, which had previously been focused on resource recovery, was divided into 12 temporary squads. While continuing their salvage work, they also had to take on the task of delivering supplies in time to all 4 defensive strongpoints. In response, everyone who received their orders stated that they had no objections at all. Even Miss Hong, despite her high status, was more than willing to submit to Song Yongxiu's unified command. Old Master Kong Zheng, however, felt that the task assigned to him was a little too light. In his own eyes, he was fully capable of holding an entire front by himself. In response, Yongxiu told Old Master Kong not to be in such a hurry, saying that her arrangement naturally had a deeper purpose behind it. The reason she had deployed him this way was because after the wall had been blown open, 3 segments of the battlefield had effectively become isolated strongpoints that could no longer support one another easily. That was why she had specifically assigned the air-stepping Kong Zheng there. With his rich combat experience, he could move flexibly among those 3 fronts and stabilize the defenders wherever pressure rose. Hearing himself praised like that, Old Master Kong Zheng immediately lit up with delight. He slapped his chest and assured Yongxiu that she could leave those 3 areas to him without the slightest worry. Air-stepping was something he had long since mastered. After that, Yongxiu further explained to the now reorganized forces that once the main beast tide truly poured into the city, she would continue adjusting each unit's position and combat strength according to the developing battle. At that stage, the 5 teams would be restructured into 3 groups and launched simultaneously from the North Gate, South Gate, and Wall Line. Their task would be to block the advance of the low-rank beast tide in reverse and create the best possible opening for the 4 Saint rank experts on their side to carry out decapitation strikes. Because of that, she solemnly warned everyone that before their Saint rank forces moved and before the 3 reinforcement groups arrived, they had to hold those 4 defensive lines at all costs, keep the beasts compressed into the southeastern sector, and isolate the battlefield outside the city as much as possible. Otherwise, if those 4 Saint rank beasts truly broke into the city, the consequences would be catastrophic. Finally, in her capacity as temporary overall commander, she gave a formal salute to every combatant and wished them divine protection in battle and total victory wherever they struck. And the people of Yong'an City, now completely twisted into a single rope, answered in one voice, praying for divine protection in battle and to be unstoppable in all directions. Right after that, everyone shut off their communication channels at the same time and moved out according to their assigned orders. Once she had arranged all of that, Yongxiu finally let out a long breath. But the burden pressing on her shoulders had not eased in the slightest. In response, Song Yongxiang opened a communication channel to comfort her, telling her that the entire deployment she had just made was extremely well done. Yongxiu then asked Song Yongxiang how the hidden nails inside the city should be handled. She was worried that those people would cause trouble in the rear once the main force concentrated on fighting the beasts. Song Yongxiang told her to leave that matter to him without worry. Uncle Ma and Uncle Xiaobei had already been watching those people in secret for some time, and he himself would personally step in afterward to remove the threat completely. Meanwhile, Lan Kun and his group, who were hurrying toward Yong'an City to rendezvous with His Excellency, had become exhausted after prolonged travel, so they chose to make camp and rest for the night inside Black Wind Gorge in the southern wasteland desert. But not long after they lit their campfire, the beasts lurking beneath the desert sand picked up their scent and found their position. In response, Lan Kun and the members of his personal guard immediately stepped forward to fight, while also ordering the others in camp to put out the campfire at once so they would not attract even more beasts. Faced with that situation, Lan Kun had no better option. At that point, they could only accept that their trail had been exposed in the heart of enemy territory, and on top of that, he had clearly underestimated the number of beasts coming to hunt them. With the size of the assault now before them, it would be extremely difficult for the few of them alone to guarantee everyone's safety. Fortunately, he had brought his personal guard with him on this journey. These merfolk warriors, equipped with the latest Zunhai-type units, at least made up for some of their disadvantage in numbers. Because of that, Lan Kun naturally did not dare waste even a second, and immediately constructed the Star Soul General Ao Bing, preparing to enter the battle in person. The Demonkin warriors who had followed Lan Kun out from Black Wind Gorge were all deeply stirred the moment they saw the Star Soul General Ao Bing standing in front of them as their guardian. One of them, the Wolf Clan female warrior, could no longer suppress the battle intent boiling inside her and immediately triggered her Star Meridian Burst, preparing to enter the fight and stand alongside their protector. The other two tribal warriors followed suit at once, stepping forward to guard the people behind them. At that, the Tiger Clan warrior specifically turned back and warned the Deer Clan girl behind him that no matter what happened, she absolutely had to protect the myriad demon codex in her arms. If that codex was lost, then their entire journey here would have been for nothing. And just as the frontline battle in Yang'an City grew increasingly intense, the forces hiding in the shadows also began making their move. Among them, the sudden strike launched by the southbound diversion team hit the guards of the City Lord Manor's north courtyard completely off guard. In response, those guards could only rush about in confusion, scrambling to react and trying to fend off the attack, only to be toyed with and thrown further into chaos. And every time they hurried to the site of another incident, all that greeted them were the corpses of their comrades, while the killers themselves remained hidden in the dark, impossible to pinpoint. Immediately after that, the enemy sniper who had been lying in ambush at long range finally made a move as well. And that escalation in the operation only confirmed one thing. The City Lord Manor had already been completely surrounded by Milan's southbound diversion team. After suffering yet another round of casualties, the North Courtyard guards finally saw the true identities of their attackers. But Jula, who had been hiding nearby all along, had no intention of giving them even the slightest chance to strike back. With the gulf and cultivation between them so vast, the City Lord Manor's guards were as fragile as paper in front of her. The last surviving guard in that squad still tried to draw his sword and make one final desperate stand. But the instant his hand rose, a precise long-range shot from Kij smashed through it and destroyed the arm. In the next moment, Jula rode straight up and finished him with 2 clean axe strikes, killing him on the spot. With that, every guard stationed in the north courtyard of the City Lord Manor had been wiped out by the southbound diversion team. After the fight ended, Jula even flashed a thumbs up toward Keeg, who had been providing long-range cover, as a simple expression of thanks for the support. Keeg then asked whether, now that they had finished suppressing the north courtyard, the two of them should move over to assist the south courtyard as well. Jula replied that with Uncle Tahi stationed there, they probably would not be needed, but to be safe, she still opened a communication line to Yuang to confirm the situation. Meanwhile, Yuang, who had personally led the assault on the south courtyard, had actually finished the battle there long ago. He simply had not bothered to report anything, and instead stood silently atop the roof, watching everything below. That near-dead stillness lasted until the communicator on his wrist sounded and broke the silence. Yet even after connecting the call from Jula, Yuang remained as taciturn as ever, saying nothing and only continuing to stare into the distance. When Jula asked whether the south courtyard had been successfully suppressed, he merely gave a small nod to indicate that the mission had already been completed. It was only when Jula told them to move toward the main building and rendezvous with Captain Wanzi that he finally gave a brief word of agreement before falling silent again. Once the call ended, he immediately used hand signals to order the Yinghe unit under him to switch into stealth mode. Throughout the entire command process, he still did not waste a single word, relying entirely on gestures to convey the next set of orders. That made it impossible for anyone unfamiliar with their internal command system to tell what they planned to do next. Meanwhile, Lan Kun and his group, who had been caught in the beast tide within the Death Desert, were still locked in a brutal battle against the Horde. But as the fight dragged on, all of them gradually began to realize that something was becoming seriously wrong. A large number of mutated beasts with frightening individual combat power had suddenly appeared across the battlefield, forcefully halting the momentum they had built. The ordinary low-ranked beasts were never a real threat to an elite guard unit like theirs, but those mutated beasts, each wielding multiple forms of attack and unpredictable combat styles, were putting them under enormous pressure. As the core of the formation, Lan Kun could only keep piloting the Star Soul General Al Bing back and forth across the battlefield, desperately putting out fires wherever the line was breaking. That piled tremendous strain onto him, and in the end it caused a fatal lapse in his focus, allowing a low-rank beast from another section of the battlefield to seize the chance and launch a sneak attack. Seeing the danger first, Lan Li immediately shouted a frantic warning to Prince Lan Kun to watch the threat at his right rear flank. But even though Lan Kun reacted and twisted himself around by force to interrupt the incoming attack, he instantly realized that he no longer had any room or time left to dodge. Left with no other choice, he could only curl his body up in midair and take the enemy's barrage head-on. Fortunately, the war halberd he had thrown earlier still succeeded in killing the Taudi-type beast, eliminating the larger threat that would have followed. Even so, Lan Kun himself was blasted out of the air by the terrifying force of the explosion and slammed hard into the ground, and the beast that had successfully broken through the line immediately seized that opening and surged toward the camp behind them. In the next instant, a group of domain insect-type beasts burst up from beneath the sand and launched the first direct assault on the Demonkin camp. In response, the two Demonkin warriors who had already triggered their soul vein bursts each stepped out on opposite sides, using their own bodies to block the incoming attacks for the sake of their companions. At the same time, They shouted for the Wolf Clan warrior named Yafeng to seize this rare opening and launch a counterattack immediately. But even with Soul Vein Burst activated, the sheer gap in individual combat power between them and the enemy could not truly be erased. The slash Yafeng unleashed with everything she had was little more than a scratch against the beast. The monster even had enough strength left over to launch a counterattack in return. That only deepened their envy toward those fellow tribesmen who could pilot Star Soul generals, lamenting that if they possessed that kind of power, they would not be pushed this far by these monsters. And just when they were running out of options, another domain insect-type beast seized the chance to attack from the rear of the camp, aiming to cut them off completely. At that, Lan Kun ignored his own injuries altogether, exploded up from the ground, and slammed his body into the beast to knock it away. Knowing exactly how important the Myriad Demon Codex was, he rushed straight toward the Demonkin girl, carrying it the moment that danger was pushed back to check her condition. However, the battlefield situation kept getting worse. More and more beasts were being drawn in by the sounds of the fighting. At that, Lan Li could not help asking His Highness what they were supposed to do next, because if this dragged on any longer, things would only spiral further out of control. Lan Kun, however, had no better answer. He could certainly pilot Ao Bing and force a breakout with part of the group, but the kindness in his heart simply would not allow him to abandon even a single Demonkin compatriot. But just as he was being driven to the edge by the situation, 2 soul power artillery shells fired from outside the battlefield tore open a sliver of hope in what had almost become a desperate field. Even so, since they still had no idea who the newcomers were, Lan Kun and his people first felt a sharp wave of danger and immediately regrouped in front of His Highness, reforming their line. The group that had just fired those shots also had a very unusual way of making an entrance. Most people's warships flew through the sky, but theirs skimmed straight across the ground. With a black flag mounted high at the stern, they looked anything but trustworthy at first glance. Yet the Demonkin who had lived in the Death Desert all this time reacted completely differently the moment they saw that flag, bursting into excited shouts as if a savior had finally arrived. This group, known as the Blazing Sand Band, were desert outlaws. But to the Demonkin living in the Canyon tribes, they were practically guardian figures. They often raided the slave-catching teams from the lower domain nation and had saved many Demonkin in the process. So when the Blazing Sand Band appeared, everyone's nerves visibly eased. Still, while Lan Kun's group remained cautious about their approach, the leader of the Blazing Sand Band was just as confused on his side, unable to understand why this group of Demonkin would be here in the first place. The encounter between these two forces felt almost like a meeting already written by fate. This Blazing Sand leader, who had personally led the entire band out at Gu Ying's request to reinforce Yang'an City, clearly had not expected to run into such a bizarre combination midway through the journey. Before he figured out why Ao Bing of Longhai Nation was mixed up with the Demonkin of the Great Canyon tribe, he stayed fully on guard. Even so, since his people were on fairly good terms with the Demonkin of the Great Canyon tribe, he still took the initiative and ordered his men to inform the other side. The deputy then used a loudspeaker to shout that they were allied reinforcements rather than enemies, and warned the Demonkin brothers to be careful in the fight to avoid any accidental friendly fire. After hearing that, Lan Kun immediately cupped his fists and expressed his thanks to the heroes of the Blazing Sand Band. Then, the instant the alliance was established, the leader of the Blazing Sand Band wasted no time and ordered his people to use a covered kill tactic to tear open the beast's encirclement for their allied forces. In the next moment, their land-cruising warship charged straight toward the beast horde. On both flanks of the vessel, the Blazing Sand marksmen moved with practiced precision and formed firing arrays, pouring out continuous gunfire to drag the beast's attention onto themselves. Meanwhile, the swordsmen and close combat fighters seized the opportunity and leaped off the ship. Taking advantage of the desert-type Nagabata unit's ability to burrow and move through sand, they avoided a frontal clash with the beasts and instead dived beneath the desert to cut straight into the center of the encirclement at high speed. At the same time, the beasts, already sick of being hammered by the Blazing Sand Band's artillery, finally eased off Lan Kun's group for the moment and turned their encirclement toward the land-cruising warship instead. These naturally cunning monsters even kept part of their force in the rear while surrounding the ship, preparing to strike back with biological plasma from range. But tricks like that were nothing new to the Blazing Sand Band, whose fighters had survived for years in the Death Desert. Warriors from the Blazing Sand Band burst out from beneath the sand and launched a sudden strike even before the beasts had finished charging their power. Their speed and coordination were so clean, it looked like they had drilled this routine countless times. Although attacks like that were not enough to score instant kills, they still succeeded in shutting down the beast's ranged fire before it could be unleashed. And in the very next heartbeat, the marksmen on the warship layered on the follow-up damage without missing a beat. The level of teamwork they displayed was so seamless that it was obviously far beyond anything Lan Kun's temporarily assembled group could match. Watching the Blazing Sand Band fight up close, Lan Kun could not help feeling deeply shaken, and from their clean, disciplined style alone, He could already tell that these people possessed brutally rich experience in desert warfare. Even so, no matter how tight the tactic, there would always be blind spots. Although the swordsmen had already carved out heavy casualties inside the beast horde, their numbers were still too limited to fully cover the entire battlefield. That gave the beasts stranded on the outer edge, the ones unable to reach their immediate targets, a chance to turn their attention toward the warship itself and unleash long-range attacks. In response, the captain standing firm at the prow finally made his move. Calm and unhurried, he summoned his personal weapon, and with a single slash, he effortlessly shattered the incoming ranged attack. Then he swung his greatsword again, locked onto the beast that had launched it, and leaped straight down from the warship. With one sword strike, he erased it completely. The power of that blow was so terrifying that even the ground around him shook violently. The beasts immediately sensed the appearance of a true monster among humans and all, turned to swarm him instead, clearly intending to drown him under overwhelming numbers. But the captain did not hesitate for even a heartbeat. The moment he moved, his signature killing move was unleashed, and dozens of golden sword auras burst into existence around him. Centered on his body, every beast touched by those golden arcs exploded into chunks of flesh and blood, scattering through the air like ash. And that was only the beginning. As the area of effect spread outward, a radius of more than 100 meters around the captain was forcibly transformed into a forbidden zone for beasts. Only then did even Lan Kun, whose perception was not especially sharp, fully grasp just how terrifying this man's strength really was. To receive help from a half-saint powerhouse at a time like this, he truly had struck unbelievable luck. However, just as the captain's large-scale technique came to an end, a worm-type beast lurking underground seized that exact instant and launched a surprise attack from below. Sensing danger at his back, the captain immediately turned with his sword, ready to meet it. But Lan Kun moved first and bailed him out, unleashing a merfolk battle technique, whirlpool strangling, and blasting the beast to death on the spot. That finally made the captain speak, and he rarely offered this younger brother a word of thanks. Upon hearing the senior's gratitude, Lan Kun politely responded that there was no need for such formality, then turned around and solemnly thanked the captain for the support he himself had received earlier. At that, the captain could not help developing a bit of goodwill toward this courteous and steady successor of Ao Bing. From that moment on, he no longer treated Lan Kun like an outsider, but directly as a comrade fighting at his side. He called for Lan Kun to follow him and continue slaughtering beasts, stating that any other matters could be discussed slowly after the battle was over. Meanwhile, the southbound diversion team's operation to suppress the Kong family was advancing with alarming smoothness. By the time Zhula and the others reached the City Lord Manor's main building to rendezvous with Captain Wanzi, he had already finished his own work and was calmly flipping through various classified files inside the confidential records room. Seeing the state of the place, Zhula frowned and complained about the corpses everywhere, noting that there was barely a place left to step, and the stench of blood was so thick it was hard to breathe. Yuang and his people also arrived at that moment. They swept their eyes across the corpses on the ground with cold, expressionless faces, making no unnecessary movements at all. Wanzi, however, as if he had already seen straight through Yuang's thoughts, directly asked him whether the suppression mission in the South Courtyard had been completed successfully. Yuang's answer was as short as ever. He only said the mission had been completed and asked Captain Wanzi to issue the next order. At that point, Wanzi stopped wasting time with indirect words and demanded an explanation face to face. Why had Yuang's subordinates shown mercy to those lackeys of Tiandu during the suppression? Nearly all of their attacks had avoided the vital points of the star coffins, subduing the targets without actually killing them. Yuang's answer was just as blunt. In his view, killing such minor troops was pointless. He then turned the question back on Wanzi and asked whether their mission objective was not, in the first place, to weaken Yang'an City's resistance, expand the impact of the beast tide, and use that chaos to lure Tiandu's main forces down to the southern border. Wanzi's face darkened after hearing that, but he could not openly explode at him. He could only warn Yuang to keep his subordinates under control and not stir up any unnecessary complications. Then he deliberately pressed on one of Yuang's sore spots, reminding him that if the southbound diversion plan was affected, neither of them would escape responsibility. Yuang, however, gave no ground at all. He said the damage had already appeared. The real issue, right now, was that the beast tide had erupted ahead of schedule. Then he asked Wanzi whether he had truly coordinated properly with the Yellow Hat group and why no prior warning had been given. In other words, he smoothly shoved the blame right back toward Wanzi. But Wanzi only brushed it aside, saying that Milun and the Yellow Hat group were nothing more than parties exploiting one another. Since the other side had dared to move early, they must have had sufficient confidence. Therefore, all the southbound diversion team needed to do now was adapt to the situation and maximize the gains and credit brought by the beast tide. At that, Zhula, who was acting on behalf of the Pingqin sacred sect in this operation, finally stepped in and cut them off, saying there was no point dragging the conversation around in circles. Her twin axes had long since grown impatient, and she was more than ready to move on to the next phase. Wansi then shifted the topic and asked about the status of Ago Duo and Kuimon. In response, Tuobabo immediately reported that Kuimon and his people were currently suppressing the rear courtyard of the city lord manor where the Kong family lived, and that it should not take much longer to finish the matter completely. At the same time, Kong Jingxin and another Kong family dependent, who had been hiding in the residence, had already been captured by the southbound diversion team. Meanwhile, her father and old ancestor were still fighting on the wall, completely unaware of what had happened back home.